Chapter 864. Black. The multicolored darkness was spreading. It was emitting waves of violent fluctuations. The light that couldn't escape from this darkness seemed particularly intense at this moment. Distortion, fluctuations, struggle, it became a confrontation between two swords that also had the property of a subspace barrier. When ordinary swords collided, bursts of dazzling sparks might burst out. But, at this moment, the moment these two swords collided, it was unusually dangerous. There was no roar, there was no lightning produced by any energy explosion, there was only a burst of fear that made all the creatures here couldn't help but feel from the depths of their hearts. Even if it was the unconscious, emotionless, and thoughtless Beta, it was the same. But, accompanying this fear was a terrifying silence. A silence that was enough to tear and devour everything. Ka-la. The terrifying silence did not rule this underground space for long before it was shattered by bursts of strange sounds. Countless rocks rose into the air at the same time as the defensive structure that covered this underground space shattered, like 100 birds returning to their nest, rushing towards the location of Lancelot King's sword and Elizabeth Emir's. Roar! During this period of time, in this increasingly spectacular and terrifying gravel, there were beasts that were previously sent flying by the shock wave and slammed into the rock wall, unable to move at all. However, the moment the silence descended, it was as if a pair of invisible hands had dragged the Beta that was deeply embedded in the rock wall out from the rock wall, and turned to pull them towards the position that was enveloped by the terrifying silence. The flying gravel continued to hit the Beta's body that was waving its limbs, constantly blooming dazzling blood flowers on the huge monster that was unable to break free from the invisible hands. Especially at the moment when the shattered gravel became denser and denser, these assault-level and intercept-level monsters seemed to have fallen into a meat grinder. They were crazily cut by the flying gravel, and the blood mist that burst out from the cut wounds dyed the gravel red. In front of Melissa Mao and Xiangliang Sosuke, a blood-colored whirlwind was formed that rushed towards Lancelot King's sword. What exactly is going on? The sensors that captured the sounds of the outside world could only hear the sound of the ground being torn apart, as well as the screams of the monsters being torn apart by invisible hands. The bloody whirlwind that covered everything in front of her made it impossible for Melissa Mao to see the situation that Lancelot King's sword was facing. Suddenly, a strange noise came from the mech. At the same time, the screen in front of him started to shake. Something seemed to be affecting the balance of the body. Could it be that, Zongjia? Hurry up and activate the legs. Bang! Bang! As soon as he finished speaking, steel stakes made of high-strength metal popped out from the feet of the two M9XS. They pierced into the unbroken defensive structure beneath their feet and penetrated deeper into the ground. Hold on, Zongjia. Melissa Mao felt powerless as she watched the Betas who had besieged them just now being pulled into the air without any resistance and died tragically in the bloody whirlwind. What kind of earth-shattering thing had happened? Perhaps only Ray Minkai in Lancelot King's sword knew about this. Ear-piercing alarms rang incessantly. In front of him was the distorted subspace barrier. It was clear at that time. Sometimes it was blurry. Occasionally, the blade would be wrapped in darkness. Quickly withdraw. Kai. The space is going to explode. The white cat State Zero's eyes were wide open, and the fur all over its body stood up. Danger! Danger! It's too dangerous! The moment the two swords with the subspace barrier clashed, Lancelot King's sword's own power was suddenly sucked away by more than half. One had to know that the reason for such a terrifying consumption last time was because Lancelot King's sword was directly facing the Cosmic Hive's main cannon fire. How do we retreat? Ray Minkai gritted his teeth, and all he could see was a big red alarm. More than half of the power consumed in an instant was not the end. The more they clashed with each other, the more the position where their swords clashed seemed to have an endless black hole that crazily swallowed everything around it, making it impossible for people to break free. Be careful behind you. The White Cat State Zero's reminder did not seem to bring anything, but Ray Minkai, who was always paying attention to the engine of Lancelot's King's Sword, knew that there was something else consuming the energy of Lancelot's King's Sword. The scene in front of him changed, and scenes of being crushed by gravel and flesh flying appeared in front of Ray Minkai's eyes. In these scenes, it was not difficult for Ray Minkai to see that those were the wreckage of assault and intercept. The culprit that caused the extra consumption of Lancelot's King's Sword was the flesh and blood wreckage that rolled in the bloody whirlwind. Retreat. Without hesitation, Ray Minkai decisively took action. However, the suction force that existed between the two swords was too strong. It was so strong that even the initiator, Lancelot's King's Sword, could not break free. What to do? Ray Minkai and the White Cat State Zero looked at each other. One man and one cat already had an answer. Ray Minkai's left hand swiped across the operating table and pressed a few buttons. The White Cat State Zero followed closely, pushing the YeldNOH reactor to the limit in the shortest time possible, directly overloading the operation. In an instant, the surging energy storm quickly spread along the line to Lancelot's King's Sword, and finally converged on the blade in his hand. Hum! The moment the low sword sound resounded, the confrontation between the swords and the confrontation between the subspace ushered in a one-sided trend. Close. Between the unbreakable space gravity, Ray Minkai saw the radiation vibration sword tearing a small hole in the opponent's subspace barrier. It was not hard to imagine that as long as the confrontation continued, the radiation vibration sword would inevitably cut the opponent's body. However, there were no ifs. This was just the opponent's bait. Even though the light and shadow fluctuations caused by the violent subspace collision made Ray Minkai unable to see Elizabeth Amir's movements clearly, Ray Minkai believed in his intuition without a doubt. Do you think you can defeat me like this? Knight from another world. Elizabeth Amir flipped her wrist, and the sword she was holding actually flipped, ignoring the strong suction force of the subspace collision, and stabbed towards the cockpit of Lancelot's King's Sword. As expected, the small gap just now was just a bait, a flaw. Ray Minkai was already prepared for this. State Zero. It's coming. Withdraw. The tacit understanding between one man and one cat was displayed to the extreme. The sword was withdrawn, Lancelot's King's Sword retreated at the same time, avoiding Elizabeth Amir's sword. Then, the terrifying energy of the subspace collision suddenly erupted. First, there was the sound of something breaking, and then there was a wave of energy that was comparable to what humans could. No, it was far more powerful than the energy generated by the explosion of the most powerful weapon that humans could currently create. Darkness had already descended. At this moment, all the light in the underground space could not escape from this darkness. In the swallowed light, the beta that was originally all over the underground space and guarding the entrance and exit struggled and twisted, but they were all sucked into this darkness and disappeared. In the darkness that was filled with death, a shadow as fast as lightning flew out from the center of the darkness and plunged into the rock wall behind the 2M9XS. Then, the shadow straightened and contracted, and Lancelot's King's Sword followed closely behind. With a stagger, he landed beside the 2M9XS. Maintain the lambda driving force field with all your strength. Prepare to resist the gravity. Without waiting for Melissa Mao and Xiangliang Sosuke to react, two steel piles that were deeply embedded into the earth's crust appeared at the feet of Lancelot's King's Sword. At the same time, a prismatic light shield quickly unfolded, firmly protecting Lancelot's King's Sword and the 2M9XS. This was already all that Ray Minkai could do to resist the explosion of the subspace. The earth cracked, the monsters flew, the power of the explosion of the subspace not only tore the ground under their feet, but also swallowed the beta that filled this place. It also tore the dome of this underground space apart and disintegrated. Rumble, the dome collapsed. Huge rocks covered with all kinds of biological tissues fell from the sky with the momentum to crush everything, but in the end, they were swallowed by the darkness that tore everything apart. Rumble, a violent tremor came from the ground. It was the powerful gravitational force that erupted from the depths of the darkness that affected the depths of this land. If this continued, all the actions that Rei Minkai had taken would inevitably be in vain, and the three of them would inevitably fall into an even more dangerous situation. Fortunately, this tremor did not last long. The gravitational force that swallowed everything came quickly and left quickly. The bêtise that sealed the surrounding area was swept clean. The earth was torn apart. The dome collapsed. When the sunlight from the outside world poured into this space, hidden deep underground, the violent energy of the subspace explosion finally came to a moment of calm. Is it over? Melissa Mao's face was pale and she was panting. Because the driving system used by the M9X was a somatosensory system, Melissa Mao had expended a lot of physical strength and mental energy in the shocking change, just now. Even Xiangliang Sosuke, who had an advantage in physical strength, was the same. It was just that Xiangliang Sosuke, who had always been a man of few words, could only silently support his exhausted body that was almost at its limit. Looks like it. On the broken ground in a sorry state, scattered under the sunlight deep underground, the figure named Elizabeth Amir was still standing there, as if she was not affected by the explosion of the subspace, and was not shaken by this shocking change. This is tricky. State 0. Are you ready? Roar. The response to Rei Minkai was a low roar full of fighting spirit. At the same time, streams of light flashed and filled the surroundings of Lancelot King's sword. A snow-white steel lion carrying a golden greatsword stepped out from the stream of light and pointed its sword at Elizabeth Amir. Chapter 865. Pure White Knight, Pure White Lion, like an integrated existence, it launched an attack on the enemy standing in the broken underground space. Roar! The moment the steel beast's roar swept over, fierce artillery fire descended from the sky and enveloped Elizabeth Amir's. It was the pure white lion that transformed into dark green armor in the blink of an eye. Its entire body was covered in large and small armors, dazzling and terrifying. Artillery shells rushed out of the barrel and rushed straight towards the enemy. Missiles broke through the darkness of the underground space, and after completing a perfect arc trajectory under the sprinkling sunlight, they fell straight towards Elizabeth Amir's. Rumble, on the broken ground, the boundary between light and darkness was instantly flooded by the sea of fire from the Longfang Lion's State 0. Melissa Mao couldn't help but gasp at the dazzling sea of flames. In the blink of an eye, the steel beast that appeared in the stream of light changed its appearance and made such a terrifying sound. At first glance, this was definitely comparable to the brigade that Melissa Mao was familiar with when she was serving in the army. No, it was already a division-level firepower attack. Yuras, 7, don't be in a daze. Now, those annoying bugs were no longer there. Get to work. Despite being surprised, Melissa Mao still saw the intention of Rei Minkai and the Longfang Lion's State 0 at a glance. It was nothing more than firepower suppression. In this case, the more firepower, the better. Therefore, the two M9XS behind the dark green long-fanged lion, which was equipped with armed compartments of various sizes, also let out their own roars, venting their frustrations from being suppressed by the beta into a corner to protect themselves. Rumble, the continuous fire illuminated the broken underground space and also flooded the vision of both sides. In addition to the rumbling sound that resounded through the underground space, there was a burst of rolling smoke. Lancelot the King's sword's high-speed pulley set off a gust of wind that tore the rolling smoke, and the radiation shield on his arm was flickering in the smoke. Kai. Under the power of the Yeldianoh reactor, the subspace barrier was also damaged. Now, Lancelot the King's sword only had the radiation shield and conventional equipment. Be careful. No. There was also the Tarsus system. The king's sword isn't just good-looking. The destruction of the subspace barrier was within his expectations. The moment he made up his mind, Rei Minkai had already prepared himself for the possibility of facing the enemy without the subspace barrier. Shielding subspace barrier, Tarsus system activated. Buzz. Lancelot the King's sword's eyes suddenly shone with golden light. Streams of golden light slid down from his gorgeous helmet and gathered in the cockpit where Rei Minkai was located. This was the Tarsus system. Who? The sound of the wind suddenly rose, and in the next moment, it was drowned out by the artillery fire that filled the sky. However, amidst the sound of gunfire, a blade was blocked by Lancelot's sword of the king's hook claw. In an instant, the incessant roaring of the cannons stopped. The rolling smoke began to dissipate, and the figure that was shrouded by it appeared in front of Lancelot, the sword of the king's sword. It was a pale, humanoid face with traces of smoke. It was ferocious, but it was torn apart by shrapnel and hit by artillery shells, as well as that sword blade. The moment he saw the blade, Rei Minkai's heart was alarmed. Are you thinking whether this sword will have this subspace barrier? As if she had seen through Rei Minkai's thoughts, the voice of Elizabeth Amir echoed in Rei Minkai's mind. Don't worry about this. Knight from another world. That kind of blade is not an ordinary blade that can be seen everywhere on the street. I just happened to get one by chance. Bang! As the hook claw flew backward, the blade swung across the air and blocked the azure blade that suddenly appeared on the left side of Elizabeth Amir. It turned out that the long-toothed lion, State Zero, had taken advantage of the opportunity when Lancelot the Sword of the King was entangled with Elizabeth Amir to quickly change from the Bangsa form to the Gale form and attacked Elizabeth Amir's left side like lightning. Unfortunately, the other party was too cautious. TSK. I've been seen through. The blue lightning retreated dozens of meters and formed a triangle with Lancelot, Sword of the King. While occupying the advantageous attacking positions on the left and right sides of Elizabeth Amir, State Zero's curses also reached Rei Minkai's ears. Rei Minkai did not respond to this. He just stared at the calculations of the Tarsus system, as well as Elizabeth Amir, who had retracted her blade and stood casually. Buzz. Suddenly, the blade trembled. Elizabeth Amir, who was still in front of him, had disappeared. However, this scene had long been foreseen by the Tarsus system. Lancelot, the Sword of the King's body, moved half a meter to the left and avoided the blade that was slashing down from the void. At the same time, the azure sword edge came crashing down from above the sword edge. Boom! The sword light slashed down. The huge power directly forced out the biological body hidden in the darkness. The power was so strong that it even made Rei Minkai, Melissa Mao, and Sosuke Xiangliang groan in pain. 2-2-2. The blue lightning succeeded in its attack and retreated decisively, leaving an excellent shooting window. In the tongues of fire of different lengths, Melissa Mao and Sosuke Xiangliang did not hesitate to pour all the ammunition carried by their beloved machine at the other party. Bang! 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 However, a shocking scene happened. Elizabeth Amir, who should have been heavily injured under the attack of the Tusk Lion Zero, actually waved a sword light and forcibly blocked all the bullets shot by the 2M9X. In the sound of the bullets being cut by the blade, Sosuke Xiangliang's expression gradually changed. Surprised, shocked, and even horrified. He had never seen such a shocking scene. Hey! This is not a movie. Isn't this against the rules? Melissa Mao felt that her back seemed to have turned cold. At this time, the hook claw swept through the air and unexpectedly knocked down the blade in Elizabeth Amir's hand. Bang! In the sound of metal clashing, the blades of the 2M9X that were blocked fell to the ground, leaving only the slightly trembling right hand and the muscle tissue that was constantly tearing. Is this the limit? Elizabeth Amir did not care that the blade in her hand was knocked to the ground. Instead, she stood up straight and looked at Lancelot, the sword of the king, who had succeeded in one attack and retracted his hook claw. Good eyesight. It's just a trick. Yes. The Tarsus system saw through Elizabeth Amirs's strong exterior but weak interior. Elizabeth Amir was not as good as she looked on the surface. The injuries from the subspace explosion were just cleverly hidden by her. Under the bombardment of the Tusk Lion Zero and the 2M9X, she saw through Ray Minkai and Lancelot, the sword of the king's actions in advance, and blocked in front of Lancelot, the sword of the king. To be honest, the sword that blocked the hook claw did indeed make Ray Minkai nervous. However, after that, the fully activated Tarsus system quickly saw through Elizabeth Amir's real situation. Therefore, a temporary response based on tacit understanding was launched. Judging from the results, Elizabeth Amirs could no longer conceal the severe damage suffered by the biological body. Trick? The sound of muscles tearing became more frequent and more horrifying. As the exposed muscle tissue was torn and disintegrated, Elizabeth Amir was almost unable to stand firm. But even so, Elizabeth Amir's voice was still calm. There are no tricks in war. There are only results. Yes, there are only results. Lancelot, the sword of the king, stepped forward. The hook claw in his hand was in a half-open position, showing Elizabeth Amir his sharp front end. Do it. Knight from another world. The current me has no strength to fight back. Elizabeth Amir's voice was unusually calm. Ray Minkai could not see a trace of yearning for life in her voice. There was only calmness in the face of death, as well as relief. The broken and dissolved muscle tissue could no longer support the body that was comparable to the height of an M9X. She had already knelt in front of Lancelot's sword of the king. As she raised her sharp claws high into the air, Elizabeth Amir's tightly shut eyes strangely opened a sliver. In that gap there were constantly streams of light flashing. Suddenly, Ray Minkai's eyes moved, as if he had noticed something. Buzz! The sharp front end of the hook claw cut through the air and slashed down. Bang! Just as Elizabeth Amir was about to be cut down by Lancelot, the sword of the king, something unexpected happened. A dagger that was only a few meters long was placed horizontally on the left side of Elizabeth Amir's neck, firmly blocking Lancelot, the sword of the king's hook claw. Buzz! On the right, the sound of wind rose again. It was Lancelot, the sword of the king's other hook claw, that flew over. In the cold light, the figure that held the dagger and saved Elizabeth Amir strangely disappeared, as if Lancelot, the sword of the king's attack, was not blocked at all. Hee-hee, unpleasant laughter quietly sounded, echoing in this underground space. I didn't expect that there would be a day when our respected war queen Her Highness would be defeated. What a surprise. This is my battle. The biological body that knelt powerlessly in front of Lancelot, the sword of the king, roared. Yes, it's your battle. But it's not me, not Mr. A, and not the result that the Parliament of the End wants. The gloomy voice made Ray Minkai feel an extremely uncomfortable chill, because, at the moment when the voice sounded, Lancelot, a sword of the king, unfolded several radiation shields, blocking all the attacks that came from the darkness. Sneaky scoundrel! Lancelot, a sword of the king's hands moved, and the two hook claws were like snakes coming out of their holes, pouncing into the shadows not far away in a flash. In a blur, Ray Minkai seemed to see the outline of a shadow being torn apart by the hook claws. Hee! I recognize you. The lucky one who made Miss Q suffer a big loss. Today you win. But, in front of the Parliament of the End, you are just a little worm struggling in vain. Next time you won't be so lucky. The black shadow fell, and Elizabeth Amir, who was waiting for the end, disappeared. Chapter 866. Under the smoke was the river of blood that spread throughout the entire Huey defense line. Every time the war chariots that galloped on this line of defense crossed the simple bridge built over the trench, waves of scarlet water would splash out, drenching the soldiers standing in the trench red. However, this was nothing to the soldiers, because since the start of the war, they had already gotten used to this battlefield environment that was filled with blood and smoke. Those who were not used to it had already become a part of this blood-red river. Attention, everyone! The enemy's formation is in chaos. All of you, get your spirits up. A hoarse voice came from the communication channel. Although it was a little unpleasant, it was the key to making the soldiers perk up again. The soldiers raised their heads and looked over. The beta that had just come aggressively and charged at the Huey defense line like a tidal wave actually showed signs of chaos. The larger tank that was covered in red turned around and ran, ignoring the assault level charging behind it. Then, in a burst of blood mist, it was smashed into pieces by the assault level. Immediately after, before the soldiers could figure out what was going on, another figure appeared on the right side of the assault level. It was the interceptor level. Those interceptor levels that could penetrate the main station's tanks and even make the MS lose its ability to move actually rushed out from the right side of the assault level that was charging in the direction of Huey in groups of 2 or 3, forcefully blocking in front of them. Suddenly, an even larger and more impactful blood mist rose into the air. Looking at the terrifying scene of the two giant monsters of similar size colliding together, even the soldiers who had been on this battlefield for a long time and whose nerves had long been numbed could not help but feel their stomachs churn. However, under this churning, there were more emotions that were difficult to suppress. Roar! Well done! At first, there were only scattered roars. Gradually, as those strange accidents continued to happen in the Beta Army, these scattered roars became continuous in the blink of an eye. At this moment, the frontline commander, whose eyes were red and who was racking his brains to maintain the defense line, did not stop the soldiers from cheering. This was because the monster army in front of them, which had broken through the Bright Knight defense line several times and made the OB defense force pay an unbearable price, could no longer set foot on the Bright Knight defense line. The short distance of less than a dozen meters seemed to have become a natural moat between the humans and the Beta Army, a wall that protected the OB defense force that had almost bled to the last drop of blood. Is it over? The body of the golden mech was full of scars, and the resplendent golden shield was also full of scars. Large and small holes made the shield almost useless. Apart from the numerous cracks on the magnificent golden body, there were also numerous scars from being melted by the high-temperature beams. On the other hand, the exhausted Carrie panted heavily. Endless fatigue battered her eyelids, urging the young lady, who had to bear the tremendous pressure of protecting her subjects and Aubrey, to rest. However, Carrie gritted her teeth and tried her best not to fall into a coma at this critical moment. Carrie. The knight did it. At this moment, Mina's communicator lit up. With all her might, Carrie lifted her head to look at the screen. Is that so? That's great. Now, is it our turn to fight back? Mina did not answer Carrie immediately. Instead, she stared at Carrie on the screen. It was not difficult to see that even with the mask blocking her vision, Mina could see that Carrie had reached her limit. Yes. I have ordered the formation of a counterattack force. It won't be long before we can drive these damned monsters out of Ob. After a pause, Mina's voice softened. However, I will lead this counterattack force. You, Carrie Yura Ashar, the current Prime Minister of Ob, will organize the post-war affairs. How is that possible? The counterattack force should be led by me. Compared to your sky, Mina, Daybreak should be standing on the battlefield until the end of the battle. Carrie shook her head, forcing herself to reject Mina's suggestion. However, Mina did not take Carrie's rejection to heart. This is not a request. Carrie. Your responsibility on the battlefield is over. The rest is to fulfill the duties of Prime Minister Ob. Whether it is the soldiers who survived the war or the soldiers who died, they all need someone to arrange the next things for them. This, Carrie bit her lip and finally let out a long sigh. Okay. I'll leave the counterattack force to you. However, even if Knight's plan succeeds, The strength of those monsters is still very different from ours. You must be very careful. Understood. See you later. Mina nodded and disconnected the communication. Then, a flame rose from the right flank of the bright night defense line. After hovering in the sky, it led more and more light spots rising from the bright night defense line into the already chaotic Beta army like an arrow leaving the bow. Humans. Their counterattack had begun. Under the bright sunlight, there was dust floating in the air, refracting the light. Amidst a soft mechanical hum, 3 steel silhouettes walked out of the shadows, standing amidst the sunlight that scattered from the shattered dome. It should be at least a kilometer high, right? With M9X's ability, I'm afraid it will have to turn back. Looking at the broken dome on the screen that seemed unreachable, Melissa Mao shook her head. If we can use the power of the Lambda drive system, maybe M9X can fly up. But now, Xiangliang Sosuke estimated in his heart and finally gave up the idea of trying to rely on the power of the Lambda drive system to fly up. So, the two of them set their eyes on Lancelot King's sword in front of them. In this temporary team, the only body with the ability to fly independently was Lancelot King's sword. How much ammunition do you have left? Lei Mingkai raised his head and looked at the broken dome. The ammunition for the long-range weapons has been used up, only the combat daggers and steel stakes are left. Well, the operation of the Lambda drive system is still stable. Same. Melissa Mao and Xiangliang Sosuke were in the same situation. They had used up all their ammunition in the battle just now. Is that so? Then, Euras 2 and Euras 7 turn back. If you can, you might as well familiarize yourself with the use of the Lambda drive system. After all, compared to limited ammunition, the power of the Lambda drive system is more reliable sometimes. Melissa Mao and Xiangliang Sosuke looked at each other and responded in unison. Understood. Light and shadow flashed, and the moment a white flash rushed up to the broken dome, White Cat State Zero withdrew its gaze from below. Don't you want me to stay and watch them? No. There's no need for that. Ray Minkai shook his head and changed the topic. Did you remember what happened just now? White Cat State Zero narrowed its eyes when it heard that. In the next second, a projection screen lit up in front of Ray Minkai's eyes. On it was the moment when Elizabeth Amirs was about to be killed by Lancelot King's sword. Although the whole process was less than 2 seconds, the light that flashed under his slightly opened eyes was so eye-catching and so attention-grabbing. Then, without waiting for Ray Minkai to speak, the image changed again. In the blink of an eye, the projection screen was divided into several images, constantly replaying the moment when the light flashed. It's here. White Cat State Zero waved its paw slightly, pausing a certain image at the moment when the light flashed. From here on, the light looks like a single ray of light to the naked eye, but after optical analysis, it's actually a light made up of multiple light beams. Light encryption. Ray Minkai looked at the image that kept zooming in until he could distinguish the different lengths of the light beams that were separated by a subtle distance. Maybe. But this thing, I can't analyze it. White Cat State Zero's ears drooped obviously. This was completely different from the arrogant White Cat State Zero, who had its tail raised to the sky when it had the chance. But I know who can crack this damn code. If it's really an encrypted message. The depression quickly disappeared from White Cat State Zero, and it immediately turned back into the fierce little white cat that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. Sharon? Ray Minkai immediately thought of his AI girl. But White Cat State Zero curled its lips and disagreed. Sharon might be able to. But this is not an encrypted message in the ordinary sense. With Sharon's current database, can she crack it in a short time? It had to be said that White Cat State Zero was telling the truth. Even if Sharon's database had integrated 2 or even 3 worlds' data, when it came to information that was beyond the knowledge of the current world, it would still be difficult. Then, there was only one choice left. Looks like I'll have to trouble the sisters again. White Cat State Zero shook its head, then packaged the message and sent it back through the Britannia Empire's special encrypted channel. It believed that there would be a response soon. What was left was to wrap things up. As a brainiac, Elizabeth Amirs had been defeated. After losing their brainiac, the Beta army that wreaked havoc on Aubrey's land was nothing more than a pile of loose sand. At this time, what they had to do was nothing more than harvest. Under the sun, Lancelot the King's sword unfolded its brilliant light wings and drew a straight flight path in the air. It turned sharply and plunged into the chaotic Beta army below in an incomparably barbaric manner, stirring up layers of bloody waves, guiding the counterattack led by Mina to break through the Beta army and converge with them. In this war between Aubrey and the Beta army, the humans had finally ushered in the victory. Chapter 867. The war that forced Aubrey into a desperate situation was over. Facing the scattered sunlight, standing in the slowly flowing red stream, for a long time, Aubrey's soldiers, who had gathered the last of Aubrey's armored forces and MS's counterattack force, suddenly seemed to have lost all their strength. They let the guns in their hands, which were already riddled with scars and had boiling hot muzzles, fall into the stream, stirring up bursts of hot and pungent mist. Gradually, what fell into the stream were not only guns, but also soldiers who could no longer muster up their strength and could only lie limp on the ground, allowing the red stream to flow past their bodies. Victory! 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 Roars of anger resounded through the smoky defensive line, and also resounded in the hearts of all the humans who were defending the Bright Night defensive line. Amidst the roars of joy, there were also uncontrollable sobs. When the moment of victory arrived, around the soldiers who had persevered until this moment, there were also more heroes who had paid the price of their lives for this moment. In the bridge of the Son of Dan's slave, Teresa stood up and looked at the bodies of the heroes floating in the blood-colored stream. She raised her hand and saluted. Under her leadership, all the personnel in the bridge did the same. As the party that had fought with the Beta, they knew how difficult it was to persevere under the attack of the boundless Beta army. After a while, Teresa put down her right hand and ordered slowly, "Madukas, exchange the supplies on the Son of Dan's slave. It's time to let the heroes take a break." Madukas straightened his body with a paw sound. "Yes, sir." After a pause, Madukas said again, "Knight has successfully boarded the ship just now." Hearing this, Teresa's eyes lit up. But soon, Teresa frowned and thought of another possibility. According to the plan, Knight should be responsible for clearing out the remaining enemies around the Bright Night defensive line. So, Madukas, did Knight say anything? Yes. Just now, when Knight was boarding the ship, he mentioned that he wanted to use the holographic conference room immediately. Holographic conference room? Teresa nodded. "Mardukas, I'll leave this place to you. I need to get there right away." "Yes, sir." When the Son of Dan knew was being modified, he had used the original holographic conference room to make it into a conference room that could directly communicate with the central hub of the Britannia Empire. Therefore, this meeting room would not be used when it was not necessary. Moreover, only 3 of the sons of Dan's slave could use this meeting room: Teresa, Richard Mardukas, and Ray Minkai. Teresa quickly arrived at the door of the conference room as she hypothesized various scenarios and came up with countermeasures. Ray Minkai was already standing at the door, waiting for Teresa's arrival. Teresa looked up at Ray Minkai. It wasn't hard to notice that Ray Minkai's face was tired, but his eyes were unusually bright. "I'm sorry, Teresa, I didn't inform you in advance and came here without permission." Teresa shook her head and smiled. "No. I think this is the moment of urgency. Isn't that so?" Teresa's little head was always very smart. Although Ray Minkai did not reveal anything, Teresa had already guessed what was going to happen next. "Well, it's not that urgent, but it's something that needs to be dealt with immediately. Come, Captain Teresa, please. A luxurious purple dress. Golden curly hair. A beautiful and serious girl stood under the blue sky, slowly recounting her experience. Elizabeth St. Amiles. Her hometown was a huge empire on an unknown planet. She was the first princess of this huge empire, and at the same time, the first heir to the throne. Since she was born, the glory of the empire had gathered on her body, protecting her as she grew up. Under this glory, the first princess did not disappoint the empire, and did not disappoint the expectations of hundreds of millions of people. At the age of 16, she led a side army and took down 3 enemy cities in a row, shocking the world with a single feat. Since then, she led the morale of the empire's army to war for 10 years, and completely controlled the entire central continent in the palm of the empire. The first princess of the empire, Elizabeth St. Amice, was called the War Princess by the empire's people, and was even given the name Saint. At that moment, her glory was so dazzling and so admirable. It was not hard to imagine. In the near future, when the old emperor handed over the throne to the War Princess who was given the name Saint, the empire would once again step onto a new level. Because, with the efforts of the Imperial Observatory and the Central Science and Technology Center, the empire that completely controlled the central continent could finally reach out and touch the vast and boundless void above their head. According to the legends passed down from ancient times, that was the domain of God. Bathed in the endless glory brought by the War Princess, the empire's people who imagined that when the empire was promoted to a divine nation in the future, they would also be promoted to the people of God. Under this dazzling glory, the empire collapsed. In the blink of an eye, the empire that had dominated the entire central continent had collapsed. No one could react in time. No one could have predicted it either. Whether it was the important figures in the imperial court, the citizens strolling on the city streets, or the diligent farmers stepping on the fields, no one could have imagined that the powerful empire would fall apart and shatter into pieces one day. And at the center of this collapse was the key figure who was supposed to lead the empire into the domain of God, the first princess of the empire, Elizabeth St. Amice. Countless monsters appeared from the center of the empire and tore apart all the humans that appeared in their line of sight, bringing blood and war to the empire's capital that the empire's people thought would never fall. That day the sun was bright and beautiful, but it was also so cold and bloody. In the imperial palace of the empire that was burned by fire, the old emperor sat on the throne. Beside him were the empress, concubines, and many princes and princesses who had died tragically from the monsters tearing their bodies apart. A pungent smell assailed the old emperor's nostrils, almost making it impossible for him to open his old eyes. But the old emperor still used the last of his strength to raise his right hand and point at the black figure standing in front of him. "You, aren't you, Ellie?" But before the old emperor could finish his words, a blood-red monster rushed out from behind the black figure and sent him to hell. Yes, that's it. In the hall where the imperial family was buried, the restless monsters suddenly quieted down and looked at the door in unison, looking at the man with a joyful smile on his face. "Look, Your Highness, this is the supreme truth that I offer to you." The scene froze at this moment. It froze at the moment when the man with a joyful smile on his face. "He is Mr. A," he said. "One of the most mysterious members of the Parliament of Destiny. At the same time, he is also the culprit who caused the destruction of my hometown and caused me to become a monster." It was an encrypted message from someone named Elizabeth Amirs. Among the information, there was information about Elizabeth Amirs' life, but most of it was about the man named Mr. A. He appeared. He lurked. He took action. Every time this man named Mr. A appeared on a planet that gave birth to a civilization, he would inevitably bring death and destruction there. 13,052 Earth hours ago, Xingyao City observed that a star in a remote world was destroyed, and the civilization there was also destroyed. Looking at the frozen image, Hinana said something that Rei Minkai and the others did not know. The petite figure hugged the pillow in her arms tightly, and a trace of anger appeared on her cute face. According to the coordinates of the planet contained in this encrypted message, that remote world is probably Elizabeth Amir's hometown. White Cat State 0 guessed correctly. Deciphering this encrypted message was not difficult for Hinana at all. It only took a little time for Hinana to decipher and recompile all the encrypted messages. After Hinana finished speaking, the meeting room quieted down. Only the holographic image that would occasionally shake due to signal problems was left. Kai, looking at the records, you have already fought with her before? The person who broke the silence was Euphemia. The Empress of the Empire looked a little haggard. It must be because of the super disaster that caused the various affairs in the Empire to surge. And she is very strong. But Rei Minkai pondered for a moment. She wants to die. Die. The people who participated in this meeting included Cornelia, Lacus, Vervian, and the others. This was especially true for Cornelia. Not only was she the imperial princess, but she was also a female general who helped the empire expand its territory. After witnessing Elizabeth Amir's life as a human being, she couldn't help but resonate with her. After recovering from her shock, a helpless, bitter smile appeared on Cornelia's lips. I think so too. Not only did she become a monster, but she also killed her loved ones under the control of others and buried the entire empire with her own hands. If it were me, I'm afraid I would do the same. Sister. Euphemia got up and walked to Cornelia's side. She raised her hand and put it on her sister's shoulder. I'm fine. Just a little emotional. Your Majesty. Cornelia shook her head, then looked at Lei Minkai and said sternly, Don't worry. Your Highness. If it's possible, she should welcome her own ending. As a human being, as well as the Empress of the Empire. I promise. On the other side, Hinana clapped her hands. That's the end of my feelings as a knight. I've found Mr. A's next plan of action. Hinana stretched out her hand and tapped in front of her. Then, images popped up in front of everyone. Speaking of which, this is the first time we've captured Mr. A's whereabouts so accurately. In the records of the administration, Mr. A's whereabouts have always been erratic. Our patrol officers have not been able to find any traces of him at all. Rei Minkai, what do you think we should do? Paradise Island. Rei Minkai's gaze fell on the image. He recognized the island on the image at a glance. Was it a trap? Or was it real? Lei Minkai didn't care about these considerations at all, because there would be a great battle on Paradise Island. Chapter 868. Paradise Island? Among all the people present, other than Rei Minkai, Lux was probably the only one who had memories of this name. As Lux Klein, whether it was her experience at that time or her subsequent life, the Battle of Paradise Island had become one of Lux's memories of that war. Even if she did not personally experience it. No, after pondering for a while, Lux thought of the key to Paradise Island that Rei Minkai mentioned. The current world situation was constantly showing signs of rapid changes due to the occurrence of super disasters. The most obvious one was the appearance of the alien enemy, Beta, and it swept through human society in a short period of time. According to the current situation, the Earth Alliance, which had lost most of its territory after Beta swept through its entire sphere of influence, would probably choose Paradise Island, which also had the strongest defense, as the final fortress. At the same time, the signs of activity brought about by the highly concentrated personnel, as well as the high energy consumption caused by the production of equipment, were like bright lights in the night, attracting the attention of the outside world. Under the invasion of the alien enemy, humans were struggling to hold on. And Beta, who was wreaking havoc on the world. After the battle, the Minerva had an exchange of information with the Abu Ministry of Defense. What Lux mentioned was actually something that everyone had expected. Whether it was the Pillar of Heaven or the subsequent Minerva, they were all proving a possibility. The Gouda seed world that Ray Minkai and Lux were familiar with was being fragmented and in the form of time stagnation, integrating into this world. However, this time, Paradise Island, and even Plant, which would appear in the Britannia Empire's site later, would, suddenly, a message pop-up appeared in front of everyone. Emergency. After Vivian and Nana looked at each other, she said. Just now, the Abu Ministry of Defense received a message from the International Public Channel. Everyone looked at each other in surprise. Release it, Vivian. Euphemia nodded. Then, the pop-up in front of everyone changed from a simple text interface to an image. In the image, it was a man giving an impassioned speech. As soon as he appeared, Ray Minkai recognized him. Even though they had never met each other in real life, they had never met each other before. However, given the content of the speech and the location he mentioned, Ray Minkai was still confident in his judgment. Rod Keppel. The new leader of Blue Persian Chrysanthemum after Yaz Lars, Rod Jiplier. Although in the movie, he had been schemed against by the old Fox chairman and was suppressed everywhere, it was undeniable that under his command, the Atlantic Federation led by Blue Persian Chrysanthemum had indeed greatly increased the military strength of the Earth Alliance. The mass-produced machines mainly based on Wundam and the technically improved version of the short sword L had completely replaced the mass-produced assault short sword of the regular MS troop. Apart from that, Rod Jiplier also ordered the various departments under his command to develop heavy weapons that could instantly annihilate the enemy. It had to be said that all of Rod Jiplier's decisions were made with the goal of completely wiping out the enemy. Behind the projection screen, a gaze fell on Ray Minkai. It was Lux. Kai. It seems that Rod Jiplier wants to use Paradise Island as a base to launch a counterattack against Beta. The video displayed on the screen was of many MS troops with Wundam, Short Sword L, and even the mass-produced GT-707E Forbidden Vortex. Behind these neatly arranged MS troops, there was a huge steel figure that could not be seen clearly with a single lens. The huge and pitch-black figure looked particularly mysterious and oppressive against the backdrop of many MS troops. Destroy Gouda! Although he could not see the entire figure clearly, Ray Minkai immediately recognized the true body of the huge figure. I have to say that Rod Jiplier does have the confidence to do so. With the ability to destroy Gouda, Paradise Island did indeed have the confidence to compete with Beta several times. As long as Rod Jiplier did not make any mistakes. From the video, this so-called Paradise Island base is indeed qualified to resist Beta's attack. But the number of Beta is always a threat. As one of the commanders who had participated in many attacks against Beta and resisted Beta's attack, Teresa had long realized that it was unrealistic to simply kill the number of Beta troops. There was only one way to completely solve the threat of Beta from beginning to end. Only by investing all manpower and material resources and using all means to destroy Hive could the threat of Beta be solved at the root. And Paradise Island, in Teresa's opinion, it did not seem to have the ability. After all, from Rod Jiplier's impassioned speech, Teresa did not hear any substantive strategy to resist Beta's attack other than the words used to boost morale and inspire emotions. Not every force can find Beta's Hive base in a short period of time like us and decisively throw in the sharp knife force to destroy it. As one of the two major figures in control of the Empire's entire army, Cornelia was very clear about the offensive strategy adopted by Ray Minkai in resisting Beta's attacks. Do you need support? The Empire's side is already free. Listening to everyone's discussion, Euphemia looked at Ray Minkai. No. Not for the time being. After all, the Minerva is also here. It's better to be safe on the Empire's side. Ray Minkai did not agree to Euphemia's suggestion to transfer the Empire's elites to support them. Ray Minkai felt that even if there were no signs of beta near the Empire's mainland, given the uncertainty of the continuity of the super disaster, any living force must be kept in the Empire's mainland as much as possible to deal with possible accidents. Okay. Then, I'll let Dr. Royd be ready. After a pause, Euphemia smiled. After hearing about the activity of Lancelot, King's Sword, Dr. Royd seems to have become a little impatient. He wants you to try his new masterpiece. New masterpiece? Is it a new body? Ray Minkai blinked, a little surprised. Ever since Royd became addicted to Copperfield, it seemed that new design inspiration was born every moment. Ray Minkai had heard about Royd constantly proposing new ideas and commanding his subordinates to develop them. Okay. Is that so? Although I'm looking forward to it, I don't plan to change to a new body this time. Then, I'll let Avalon stand by above Paradise Island. Euphemia's smile was warm and moving. However, behind that smile, there was an emperor's majesty that could not be refused. Ray Minkai acquiesced to Euphemia's arrangement. Fortunately, Euphemia only arranged for Avalon to come to support, not the floating fortress, Damocles. With the weapons equipped with the floating fortress Damocles, it was bound to be able to eliminate any hive that appeared within its range in a short period of time. However, as a national treasure, Damocles could not easily leave the Empire's mainland. This could be considered Euphemia's arrangement. Ray Minkai did not refuse, nor could he refuse. The outline of the operation regarding Paradise Island was quickly finalized in a global speech by Rod Giplier. Ray Minkai's side still dispatched the Minerva, its subordinates, and Ray Minkai. Although the Minerva was under Zaf's command, Ray Minkai believed that Captain Talia would still make the correct decision. As for Aubrey's side, Ray Minkai might need to confirm Mina and Carrie's thoughts. However, before that, Ray Minkai seemed to have something to deal with. After the meeting ended, a beautiful figure quickly arrived on the son of Dan's slave. She wore an elegant long dress. Her soft black hair was tied up into a high ponytail. Beside this beautiful figure, there was a squarish electric suitcase with flashing LED lights on the edges. It slowly followed her footstep. Look, why are you here? The people on the son of Dan's slave had already gotten used to Lux's ability to transform living people from time to time. Thus, when Ray Minkai directly called out Lux's real name, it did not attract any surprise from the surrounding people. Since you're free now, accompany me on a trip. As Lux smiled sweetly, she reached out and patted the electric suitcase lightly. This child was personally made and given to me by Nana on my birthday. All this time, I haven't found a chance for it to display its abilities. Now, it can be considered an opportunity. Lux's exclamation made Ray Minkai somewhat puzzled. Apart from being puzzled, Ray Minkai was also astonished by the electric suitcase, which first used the LED lights to create a depressed expression, then changed into an expression of working hard. It has its own AI? As soon as he finished speaking, the electric suitcase left Lux's side with a slight buzzing sound and came to Ray Minkai's side. It gave him a hello emoticon. Nice to meet you. The princess's guardian knight. I'm Little Box. At this time, the figure of the white cat, State Zero, appeared on Ray Minkai's shoulder. The gaze of a cat and a box seemed to converge at this moment. Hello. Knight's little cat. I'm Little Box. In an instant, a murderous aura rose from Ray Minkai's shoulder. Roar. What the hell is this? I'm not a cat. Its sharp claws were waving around in the air. The roar of a beast reverberated back and forth in the tunnel. But soon, after Ray Minkai reached out and clamped the back of the white cat's neck, it became calm again. It seems that State Zero likes this child quite a lot. Maybe so. Ray Minkai patted the white cat's little head, comforted it, and continued speaking. Didn't you say you were going out? Let's go. Let's go. As the long skirt fluttered, a fragrant wind greeted them. Maybe we'll meet an old friend. That child seems to have grown up. Chapter 869. Luna Maria struggled to put a water tray full of bloody bandages on the cart at the door. Since the end of the fierce battle, Luna Maria hadn't had a good rest before Real Flying Bird walked down from the Pulse Gauda and hurriedly left the Minerva without looking back. Then, she learned the reason why Real Flying Bird was in such a hurry from Remington. Real Flying Bird ran to help the wounded just like he did when he was saving the Pillar of Heaven. This request naturally wasn't Real Flying Bird's hot-headed idea. After the battle ended, True Flying Bird immediately sent a request to Captain Talia. Maybe it was because they fought together and resisted the enemy. Maybe it was because Ob was a traditional friendly country of plant. Maybe it was because of other reasons. Captain Talia didn't have to think for long before she agreed. She then distributed some of the Minerva's resources to True Flying Bird to bring them over. Luna Maria. This is the real motherland. No need to be so surprised. Facing Luna Maria's confusion, Rem was much calmer. He understood Talia's intention of agreeing to Real Flying Bird's request. Therefore, Rem, who didn't want to explain too much to Luna Maria, turned around and pushed the cart full of medical supplies and chased after Real Flying Bird. Seeing the two leave one after another, Luna Maria was puzzled, but she didn't want to be left alone. Therefore, there was the scene just now. Where did these two guys get the stamina? They came here right after the battle and stayed here for a few hours. Luna Maria wrinkled her nose and looked up at the night sky full of stars. Luna Maria, do you have any more bandages? At this time, the voice from the treatment room made Luna Maria feel discouraged. Humph. You only know how to save people, don't you know how to eat? After Luna Maria rubbed her empty stomach, she turned around and pulled out a new box of bandages from the bottom of the cart. Hiss! Why is it a bit heavy? Luna Maria's body swayed and she lost her grip on the box. Be careful! Just as the box was about to hit Luna Maria's feet, a pair of strong hands caught it just in time. At the same time, a familiar mask appeared before Luna Maria. Ah! I'm sorry. It's you. Night. And if you're tired, then go and rest. The food is ready. The person who came was Lei Minkai. News of Real Flying Bird, Ray and Luna Maria from the Minerva being active in the treatment area for the wounded had spread throughout the Bright Night defensive line. After Luna Maria responded in a daze, she subconsciously took a step forward, but she was forcefully pulled back by her. No, now is not the time to eat. Luna Maria forced herself not to think about eating. Just as she reached out and wanted to take the box from Ray Minkai, she was stopped by another pair of hands. At the same time, a voice that had a strong affinity and could inadvertently make people relax silently slipped into Maria's heart. Luna Maria, you've done enough. Now, it's your turn to rest. Leave the rest of the matter to us, okay? The one who stopped Luna Maria was a slightly familiar black-haired girl. Luna Maria remembered that in the previous battle, this black-haired girl seemed to be in the bridge of the Minerva, sitting beside Captain Talia as a guest. You're Miss Audrey? Yes. Now it's your turn to rest. Luna Maria. The black-haired girl, no, it should be said that Lux, who appeared with Audrey's face, gently held Luna Maria's hands and brought her to the resting area where the food was already laid out without giving her any chance to refuse. I'll bring Luna Maria over first. Please bring this child to the treatment area. Looking at Luna Maria being pulled away by Lux, and then looking down at the electric suitcase that was greeting him with an emoji, Ray Minkai actually felt a little funny in his heart. What the hell is this thing? Seeing that the surrounding was busy and no one was paying attention to it, White Cat State Zero jumped from Ray Minkai's shoulder to the top of the electric suitcase. The moment State Zero of the White Cat landed, the electric suitcase with changing emojis actually sent out a painful emoji. This guy can feel pain? White Cat State Zero raised its sharp claws and made a gesture back and forth on the screen with the painful emoji. Wait. Let's talk nicely. Little Box is not a bad guy. After the conversation screen flashed a few times, a begging emoji appeared. This made White Cat State Zero grind its teeth and finally gave up the idea of testing the electric suitcase. Ray Minkai, who was beside him, shook his head slightly. Let's go. Your name is Little Box, right? You should know what Audrey wants to do later, right? As soon as Ray Minkai finished speaking, the electric suitcase named Little Box immediately displayed an awesome emoji. Of course, I was created by Master Nana because of this. Thinking of Nana's miraculous Kanglen technology, Ray Minkai decided not to delve deeper into Little Box's abilities. After all, Ray Minkai had seen and experienced the even more exaggerated power of the Hedron shield. Lifting the suitcase, he strode forward to the door of the treatment area and pushed it open. A burst of nervous and busy sounds suddenly came from the front. Luna Maria. You, beside the door, a figure flashed over. Before Ray Minkai could speak, the figure nimbly snatched the suitcase from Ray Minkai's hands, lifted the suitcase without looking back, and ran towards the depths of the treatment area. In the tense atmosphere, even the young man's exhortation could be heard. Luna Maria, this suitcase is not enough. Go and see if there are any other bandages. The back view of the red Zaft military uniform with his sleeves rolled up was the young man who was so busy that he was sweating profusely. On both sides of the passage he walked through, there were many Audrey soldiers with blood-stained bandages all over their bodies. Their faces were filled with pain, but they were also filled with joy. The pain came from the injuries on their bodies. The joy came from the fact that they finally won the invasion that almost caused Audrey to fall into eternal damnation. Knight? What are you doing here? Just as Ray Minkai was sizing up the surrounding situation, Ray's voice came from the side. Turning around, Ray Minkai saw the blond young man who had changed into a white coat. Ray? Seems like you're adapting well to the situation here. Compared to the real Flying Bird, who didn't even change into a military uniform and directly treated the wounded, Ray was much calmer. Ray Minkai could even see that the hem of Ray's white coat was stained with a few small bloodstains. Knight, I'm sorry. It's just that after this war, most of the wounded who can be accommodated here are mostly external injuries. The battlefield first aid course I learned before just happened to come in handy. Ray's face seemed a little pale, but Ray Minkai could see the brilliance in his eyes. Is that so? Ray, you don't have to be too humble. After all, you're saving lives and saving their tomorrow. Ray Minkai pointed to the wounded on the hospital beds behind Ray. It wasn't hard to tell from the way the wounded secretly looked over here that Ray must be the one who personally treated them, right? Of course. There was an even more important point. Even the nurses shuttling back and forth among the wounded were secretly sizing them up. Ray Minkai, who was very self-aware, naturally didn't think that those little nurses were looking at him. Their target must be the handsome young man with long blonde hair, a handsome face, and a hint of melancholy between his eyebrows, Ray Za-bearer. Suddenly, a burst of noise came from the depths of the passage where the real Flying Bird left, causing the wounded around to turn their heads to look. Ray, go do your work. Okay. Then, Ray Minkai reached out and patted the electric suitcase beside him. According to Audrey's idea, what should you do now? Of course, start working. After a line of words was written, the electric suitcase named Small Suitcase unfolded its true form hidden in the ordinary appearance of the electric suitcase. Buzz buzz, a burst of inaudible buzzing sounded, palm-sized, triangular drones rose from the unfolded electric suitcase one after another, gliding over the wounded's head in groups of 2 or 3, flying in the direction of the commotion. The flight trajectory dragged by the glimmering light like breathing attracted the attention of the surrounding wounded. It seems that it was right to bring this child here. Ray Minkai listened to the voice from behind and was a little surprised. Medical drones? And you can say that. Of course. That's just one of Small Suitcase's abilities. The black-haired girl passed by Ray Minkai and took the lead to the passage where the commotion came from. Her voice still lingered in the air. Small Suitcase's original name is the Multifunctional Integrated Tactical Music Support AI. It sounds very powerful, right? It's indeed a little powerful. The black-haired girl smiled and waved her hands gently. The second batch of drones that took off swarmed over and began to scan the wounds of the surrounding wounded in coordination with the black-haired girl's movements. Then, beams of healing light were aimed at the wounds, and Lux's voice was transmitted to Lei Minkai's ears. According to the administration's latest research, the singing of some singers seems to be able to enhance the recovery speed of human injuries with the help of special equipment. And I seem to be one of these singers. As soon as her voice fell, the singing started. Chapter 870. The sun set and the moon rose. When the pure white moonlight shone on the table, it was already time for Carrie to work for several hours after returning from the intense battlefield. Just as Mina had said, whether it was the soldiers who had died in battle or the soldiers who had survived, they urgently needed someone to arrange a place for them to go. However, Carrie, who was so engrossed in her work, did not take into account that she herself was also someone who had walked out from the intense battlefield. The tragic experiences she had on the battlefield, the accumulated fatigue she had accumulated was not much better than the surviving soldiers of Aubrey. I did not say that you have to disregard your fatigue and fight until dawn. The moment the door opened, a familiar figure stepped into Carrie's office. Behind her were two helpless and troubled Aubrey soldiers. Go and rest. Let me take care of this myself. Lord Mina will not make things difficult for me. Carrie put down her pen, rubbed her temples, and stood up. She spoke as she walked to the tea table on the right side of the room. Would you like a cup of coffee? Or perhaps a cup of tea? Mina's sharp eyes looked at Carrie's stubborn expression for a while, then shook her head. No, I don't need that kind of thing. Mina turned around and walked to the table, casually picking up the documents on the table and glancing at them. Compensation for the families of the martyrs? I didn't expect you to think so far ahead. Prime Minister. Carrie held the kettle tightly, wanting to make herself a cup of coffee, but she realized that standing up was already all she could do. Taking advantage of the fact that Mina could not see her trembling right hand holding the kettle, Carrie sighed inwardly, let go of her hand, and turned around to respond. Every soldier who sacrificed for Aubrey should be treated as they deserve. And the families who lost their heroes will not lose their pillar of support because of this. Because Aubrey will take care of the families of the deceased heroes until... She paused for a moment and subconsciously looked behind her desk, to the right of where she usually sat when she was handling official business. That was where her loyal and close guards used to stand. Until, after 100 years, the families of the heroes will go to the other side to reunite with the heroes without any regret. Even though it was only for a moment, Mina still noticed Carrie's gaze. However, she did not point it out. Placing the document back on the table, Mina strode over to Carrie. Then, I'm done here. It should be our Prime Minister's turn to visit the soldiers who were injured for the country. But I still have some unfinished business here. Suddenly, Mina took advantage of Carly's inattention and slapped her on the shoulder. Caught off guard, Carrie's legs turned to jelly and she almost fell to the ground. Fortunately, as the instigator, Mina was quick enough to support Carly. Now, do you still think you have the energy to continue working? Aubrey's Prime Minister. Carrie struggled for a moment, but eventually gave up on the idea of continuing to work on the document. Clearly you also, work and rest should be balanced. Isn't that so? Thus, under the watchful eyes of her subordinates, Carly followed behind Mina and boarded the vehicle that had been prepared beforehand. They drove all the way to the treatment area where the wounded were being treated. Gazing at the ruined city outside the window, looking at the originally lively scene that had now turned into a pile of rubble and monster remains that hadn't been cleaned up yet, Carrie suddenly felt her shoulders become heavier. The battle that almost destroyed Aubrey had ended. The next thing to do was to rebuild Aubrey. Along the way, Carrie's expression kept changing. At times it was serious, at times it was sad, at times it was struggling. Mina did not try to persuade her. This was all a test for Carrie. Not long after, the convoy from the Prime Minister's residence slowly drove into the treatment area. Before the vehicle stopped, Carrie, who was thinking about Aubrey's future, was startled awake by a commotion. "What's going on?" Outside the window, there was a faint but clear voice. At the same time, in the largest building for the wounded, there seemed to be flashing lights floating in the air. Puzzled, Carrie got out of the vehicle and pulled an Aubrey soldier who was not far away. "What's going on inside?" To Carrie's surprise, the Aubrey soldier didn't immediately respond. Instead, after being urged by Carrie several times, he seemed to have snapped out of his daze and saluted Carrie in a fluster. I'm sorry, Madam Carrie." Compared to the Aubrey soldier's dereliction of duty, Carrie was more concerned about what was going on in the building for the wounded. However, the Aubrey soldier hesitated. "It seems like someone is singing in there." The Aubrey soldier stammered a few times before he uttered a sentence that left Carrie scratching her head. "Don't make things difficult for him. There is indeed someone singing here. Moreover, the person singing is someone you know." When Mina's affirmative voice sounded, Carrie saw the Aubrey soldier heave a sigh of relief, but he did not dare to show too much of it. This made Carrie feel helpless. "Go back to your duty. Pay attention to your surroundings." "Yes, Madam Carrie." Looking at the backs of the fleeing Aubrey soldiers, Mina stood at the gate and looked at Carrie. "If you're curious, why don't you follow me? No one will come to welcome you if you just stand there. Prime Minister." The corners of Carrie's mouth twitched, but she did not respond to Mina's sarcasm. To her, such sarcasm was something she was used to. In the depths of the bone-chilling night, Carrie followed behind Mina. The moment she stepped through the door, Carrie's spirit was lifted. She felt refreshed, and the accumulated fatigue in her body seemed to have disappeared. What's going on?" Carrie's bewildered gaze followed Mina to the hall of the building, landing on the figure surrounded by the wounded. Rays of pure white light scattered from the small triangular drone hovering above the hall, covering the figure like moonlight. The figure that seemed to be covered by a layer of holy white gauze was so beautiful, so holy. The singing of prayers seems to be faintly glowing. "That is R.A." After a pause, Carrie recognized the back of the figure. However, the moment she touched the long black hair, Carrie seemed to have understood something and did not speak. Mina gestured to an empty corner and signaled for Carly to follow her. As soon as she walked over, Carrie saw a familiar mask and a familiar figure. No. Night. I didn't expect it to be you. You? Carrie looked at the figure sitting in the corner in surprise, then subconsciously turned to look at the eye-catching figure in the hall. We're missing, aren't we? Before Carrie could ask, the man took the initiative to speak with a smile. According to the actual situation, we are indeed missing. This is not something to be surprised about, isn't it, Prime Minister? Carrie stared at the mask for a while, then finally nodded. You're right. After all, under those circumstances, Carrie sighed, then suddenly put on a serious expression. Night. After that, you didn't return to plant? You went with her and Audrey. The man named Knight frowned. He understood. Carrie's words seemed to be hiding something. No. At that time, we were indeed missing from this world. They've completely disappeared. As he spoke, the gaze hidden under the mask was still wandering around. Maybe it was because the singing was unusually moving. Maybe it was because the figure was very eye-catching. Other than the triangular drone hovering above the hall, no one noticed the situation here. Then, who was the Holy Lion Knight who appeared in Zaft half a year ago? Carrie finally asked the question that had been in her heart for a long time. Half a year ago, Holy Lion Knight? This time, it was the man and Mina's turn to be surprised. It seems that the changes in this world are far beyond our imagination, isn't it, Mina? Perhaps so. When the pillar of heaven fell into this world, we didn't receive any news about the Holy Lion Knight. It seems that the destiny plan advocated by our chairman Dylandal is far more complicated than we know. Watching the two talk back and forth, using the name Holy Lion Knight as the basis, Carrie could speculate a lot of possibilities. She frowned and couldn't help but organize the information she knew in her mind. In fact, after the crisis of the X-1 rift erupted, Zaph's newest warship, the Minerva, went missing. After the subfleet that went to the D Frontier Research Space Station to search sank, Zaph was suppressed by the monsters that came out of the rift at his doorstep. It wasn't until Chairman Dylandal relied on the powerful lethality of the miniaturized Genesis and the efforts of the Holy Lion Knight that Plant and Zaph officially declared as the hero of the battle against Yukine that they were able to eliminate the alien monsters that once suppressed Plant's doorstep. Holy Lion Knight? Yukine? The eyes hidden under the mask gradually turned cold. There was only one person who could be crowned with the title of Holy Lion Knight in the battle against Yukine. That was when the Genesis was about to be launched towards Earth. The pilot who piloted the Freedom Gouda and then used unknown means to summon a pure white steel lion to destroy the Genesis in one fell swoop, Ray Minkai. If that person is the so-called Holy Lion Knight, then who am I? The mask was slowly taken off, revealing the true face hidden behind it to Carrie. Chapter 871. Plant's Capital, April City. A fleet returning from an expedition was slowly sailing into the harbor, welcoming the first rest after the crisis from the X-1 rift. This fleet had been hastily formed at the time of the crisis to risk destruction and a difficult expedition. In the end, it had become the first fleet in the entire Zaft army in a life-and-death crisis. A first fleet led by the Holy Lion Knight. A powerful fleet formed by a man with the Holy Lion Knight at a critical moment and personally led the attack to fight against the enemies from another world. In order to welcome the return of this illustrious fleet, the logistics personnel, who had already made all the preparations, immediately took action the moment the battleship was completely fixed at the harbor berth. Battleship maintenance personnel, material supply personnel, the medical class swarmed over, but they started all their work in an orderly manner. Looks like we can take a breather this time. Looking at the busy scene, a man standing at the port dispatch center heaved a sigh of relief. What are you talking about? Now is not the time to relax, Diego. Those disgusting monsters might come over to attack Plant at any time. The man with silver shoulder-length hair grabbed his friend's collar and loudly scolded him. That angry expression did not make his friend retreat half a step, because he knew that the seemingly angry man with short silver hair in front of him was just being difficult. All right, can't I be wrong? Yitzhak. But in fact, the First Fleet is the great hero who cleared out the enemies in the universe around PLNT, isn't it? Diego skillfully comforted his best friend in a few moves, as if he was comforting an angry cat. Humph. Who cares about that bastard? If we were to participate, we would be able to do the same. Although his hair had been smoothed out, the awkwardness was still there. However, this awkwardness was directed at someone. Yo, Yitzhak, Diego. You guys are here too. At this moment, a familiar voice sounded. The two of them turned around. Isaac raised his eyebrows, his head tilted 45 degrees, and said with slight disdain, "What a joke! Oh? What? Our instructor didn't train rookies in the training camp, but came here instead? Could it be that you've mustered the courage to come back and fight?" The man didn't care much about Zach's sarcastic remarks, because after getting along with Isaac for a long time, he already knew that Isaac only had a sharp tongue. "Yitzhak, what are you talking about?" Knowing was knowing, but every time he performed the same bridge like this, Diego, who was a bystander, was helpless. Nigel, are you on leave today? Due to the crisis of the X1 crack, the entire Zaft army cancelled their vacation and entered a state of emergency. They were prepared to enter the battlefield at any time and fight against the otherworldly monsters. Therefore, during this period of time, the Zaft soldiers shuttling through the streets and alleys of Plant had become the scenery of Plant. Only after Diego said this did Isaac realize that his friend in front of him had actually changed out of his Zaft uniform and changed into casual clothes. Nigel? You left Zaft? In an instant, Isaac blurted out what he thought was the answer. Hey! Yitzhak! Calm down! Diego saw this and pulled Yitzhak, who was about to explode, on the spot. Nigel, who are you going to pick up? In the end, Diego's gaze was sharp, and he immediately saw through Nigel's purpose. Nigel smiled and pointed to the floor-to-ceiling window behind Yitzhak and Diego. Under the orders of the speaker, I have come to welcome my friends who have returned home. First Fleet, flagship, Lion of Victory. Under the gazes of many people, the group walked down from the battleship. Among the group of people, the most eye-catching one was the man who walked to the front and had most of his face covered by a mask. He was wearing a fitting white Zaft military uniform. He took standard steps and stepped onto the land he protected. Welcome back, our hero. As soon as they saw the White Knight walk down the trestle, the Department of Defense, who had been waiting for a long time, took the initiative to step forward. Thank you for your hard work, Holy Lion Knight. I am Les Ardis, Commissioner of the Department of Defense. The man in the purple uniform was the first to raise his hand and salute. Thank you for your hard work. The white-clothed knight returned the salute. Holy Lion Knight. The First Fleet's resupply and rest plan has been arranged. In addition, the entire First Fleet will rest according to the rotation plan. I hope that everyone who returns victorious can have a good rest during this rare holiday. Les Ardis glanced at the people lined up behind the white-clothed knight and said the next arrangements. Please accept this arrangement. This is a decision made by the Department of Defense and even the Speaker. The hastily formed First Fleet paid a great price to protect Plant. If after the First Fleet returns victorious, we, who are being protected, can't let the heroes who fight to protect us rest well, we will have no face to face all the Plant citizens who are always looking forward to the return of the heroes. Yes. At this point, the white-clothed knight and his subordinates did not show any resistance. However, before disbanding on the spot, Les Ardis stopped the white-clothed knight. Holy Lion Knight, please come with me. The speaker hopes to see you as soon as possible. Hearing this, the white-clothed knight nodded and turned to face his subordinates. Everyone, the battle that belongs to us at this stage has come to an end for the time being. Next, it is a rare rest time. I hope that everyone can adjust their states during this period of rest and face the next phase of the battle in 100% condition. Yes. Captain Kai. This scene also fell into the eyes of those who were interested. How impressive! Holy Lion Knight. As the cold snort sounded, an extremely angry face appeared again. All right, Yitzhak. What's there to be angry about? After all, he is a great hero who returned victorious. Compared to this, it's better to go to Neger's side. Seeing that Yitzhak was about to run over and make a scene, Diego immediately pulled his best friend in the direction Neger had left. Holy Lion Knight. In the propaganda of the Plant's Supreme Council and Zaft, it was the hero who stopped Genesis from shooting to Earth, Ray Minkai. During the PLNT crisis, he was pushed to the position of commander of the First Fleet by Dylandal, and after his first public appearance, he had been wearing a mask on the battlefield. Due to his powerful and exquisite driving ability and his commanding ability, more and more people had their doubts dispelled. At the same time, more and more people accepted the existence of the Knight of the Holy Lion, that the highest council called Knight of the Holy Lion. However, compared to the increasingly fanatical Zaft soldiers and plant citizens under the increasingly illustrious record of this Holy Lion Knight, Yitzhak and Diego, who had spent time in the military academy with Ray Minkai, felt a sense of dissonance. That guy has become abnormal. That strict, inflexible and obedient look makes me want to vomit. Taking advantage of a joint attack opportunity, Yitzhak successfully contacted Ray Minkai, who had just become the commander of the First Fleet, and came to this conclusion. Similarly, as a recruit training instructor, Neger had met Ray Minkai once when the First Fleet was formed. Although that conversation did not make Neger feel anything unusual, when he recalled it afterward, Neger was surprised to find that Ray Minkai seemed to avoid talking about Lakis. In the face of this situation, Diego, who had never talked to Ray Minkai, could only give a suggestion of waiting and observing. After all, the Holy Lion Knight was pushed to the position of hero by the Plant Supreme Council and Zaft to save Plant from danger. Even with the support of the family behind Yitzhak, Diego, and Neger could only temporarily suppress the doubts in their hearts and wait for the opportunity to uncover them. The convoy carrying the white-clothed knight soon arrived at the Plant Supreme Council. As soon as the convoy stopped, it was drowned out by layers of sound wave. It was the citizens waiting on both sides of the road. As soon as they saw the convoy driving into the road leading to the Supreme Council, the citizens immediately burst into loud and enthusiastic cheers. Sometimes they shouted the name of the First Fleet, and sometimes they shouted the name of the Holy Lion Knight. Gradually, the names shouted by the citizens became uniform until the moment the white-clothed knight got out of the car and stepped on the red carpet, the same name resounded over the entire Supreme Council. Holy Lion Knight! The sound waves were so loud that they even reached the Supreme Council. Dilindar, who was dealing with official business, frowned and raised his head slightly, only to see the officers standing outside the door. Dilindar, who already knew what was going on outside, nodded slightly, indicating that the officer could follow the schedule according to the next affairs. It's time to welcome our hero. Dilindar lowered his gaze, glanced at the document he was processing, and silently got up and left, leaving only the document that was illuminated white by the light. Under the light, a name was particularly eye-catching. Urgent report. An unknown battleship suspected to be the Minerva has appeared in Ob. After the Minerva disappeared in the crisis of the X-1 rift, Dilindar had never given up on searching for it. Even in the most difficult moment of Plant, Dilindar did not recall the search fleet that had been sent to search for the Minerva. Now, at this moment when the surrounding environment of Plant was stable, when Zaft, who had his hands free, was about to launch a combat operation against Earth, the missing Minerva strangely appeared in Ob. This caused countless doubts to arise in Dilindar's heart. But the more important thing was to welcome the hero of Plant as soon as possible, the knight who was personally promoted to the position of hero by him. Chapter 872. Welcome back to our victorious hero. Leading the crowd, Dilindar personally welcomed the return of the Holy Lion Knight in the hall where the original evidence 01 was placed. Speaker, thank you for your help. The Saint Lion Knight stood still and saluted. It was done in one go, and it carried a sonorous and iron-blooded demeanor. It seems that our hero's demeanor is even better than before. Dilindar nodded in satisfaction. At the same time, he also signaled that the commissioner who led the Holy Lion Knight could leave. He stepped forward and patted the Holy Lion Knight on the shoulder. Thank you for your hard work, Kai. This is what I should do. There is no hard work, Speaker. In order to protect the people of Plant, I should go through fire and water, the Holy Lion Knight said in a methodical manner. Listening to the communication between the speaker and the Holy Lion Knight, the people around couldn't help but nod secretly. Just as Plant and Zaft jointly advertised, the man who was promoted to the position of hero by the speaker was indeed qualified to hold the title of knight. Haha. Okay. Let's not be polite here. Dilindar smiled and didn't continue the topic of small talk. He gestured slightly to the crowd behind him, and several people in the crowd left. I wanted to have a good talk with Kai, but just now I happened to receive good news. Therefore, I hope Kai can come with me. Yes. It's my honor, speaker. Of course. The crowd outside the Supreme Council hadn't dispersed yet. Therefore, in this situation that was considered risky by security, Dilindar naturally couldn't leave from the front. Instead, he chose to leave from the underground exit on the other side of the Supreme Council. When the world outside the window changed from the gloomy underground garage to a bright city, Dilindar adjusted his sitting posture slightly and turned his head to look at the world outside the car. His gaze gradually focused on the huge orbital elevator standing in the middle of the city. Clouds lingered around it, making the orbital elevator, which was related to the operating artery of the entire satellite city, hazy and abnormal. The brilliance emitted by the elevators that rose and fell along the tracks seemed to come alive in this hazy cloud. It was sometimes bright and sometimes dim, like a small fish that stirred up ripples on the surface of the water. According to the weather schedule of April City, soon, this satellite city would usher in a hazy drizzle. Kai. Now the security situation around Plant has been stabilized. In the colonial satellites far away, some civilians have also sent requests, hoping to migrate to Plant, or Zaft will send a fleet to support them. This is all thanks to you and the first fleet you led. Therefore, the Supreme Council has made a decision to evaluate and reward your contributions. Dilindar withdrew his gaze from the clouds that gradually became thicker and looked at the Holy Lion Knight sitting opposite him. I'm ashamed. This is not something I can't do alone. If possible, I hope the Supreme Council will pay more attention to the many soldiers who sacrificed to protect Plant. With his hands on his thighs and his back straight, the Holy Lion Knight didn't care about his own contributions. He only cared about the arrangements of his comrades who died in battle. Speaker. Dilindar nodded slightly and looked at the mask in front of him. Speak. Kai, in the hearts of the citizens of Plant, you are the guardian of Plant. Therefore, your voice and your words are the voice that our Supreme Council must listen to. The Holy Lion Knight didn't immediately respond to Dilindar's words that were almost a promise. Instead, like what Dilindar did just now, he looked back at the world outside the window and the city that was constantly flying by outside the window. On the way back, I heard some rumors. Dilindar put his hands together and put them on his abdomen as if he was listening. Now Plant is implementing a material rationing system that prioritizes the supply of combatants and their family members. The Holy Lion Knight paused, retracted his gaze, and looked at Dilindar. Yes. Because of this, Plant was able to complete the adjustment of Zaft's combat force in the shortest time possible and take the lead in eliminating threats to the surrounding universes. Of course, this is also inseparable from the bloody battle of Zaft's soldiers. Dilindar admitted this point straightforwardly. Indeed. But I found that in the First Fleet and the Allied fleets that once assisted the First Fleet, there were some rumors that they refused to continue to provide supplies to their families on the grounds of the death of their soldiers. I wonder if the speaker has heard of such rumors? Oh! The eyes hidden by the mask keenly captured Dilindar's surprise. A look of surprise flashed across Dilindar's face. Is there such a thing? Kai, wait for a moment. With that said, Dilindar raised his hand and pressed a button on his side. Then, an unfamiliar and calm voice sounded. Speaker. What are your orders? You should have heard what the knight said. Investigate it as quickly as possible. Plant and Zaft will not allow the bullying of heroes to exist. In addition, urgently allocate a batch of supplies and distribute them to the families according to the First Fleet's casualty list. Well, you will personally supervise it. Yes. Before Dilindar, who disconnected the communication, could speak and promise to thoroughly investigate the incident, the Holy Lion Knight spoke first. Speaker. Thank you very much. No. This is what I should do. While you are fighting bloody battles on the front line, my duty is to stabilize the rear and provide an environment where you have no worries. With that said, Dilindar sighed. But this time, it is my negligence. Kai, if possible, I hope you can personally apologize to the families of the heroes who were treated improperly after the incident is investigated. Yes, I will personally accompany the speaker. After that, there was nothing else to say. Although Dilindar still had a lot to say and wanted to talk to the Holy Lion Knight in front of him, under this small episode, Dilindar knew that this was not the best time. What's more, this small episode was not a bad thing. When the hazy drizzle fell and wet the road to the factory area near the April City spaceport, Dilindar and the Holy Lion Knight came to a Neku located deep in the factory area. The sense of weightlessness brought about by the microgravity environment made the body subconsciously miss the heaviness of the gravity environment. Dilindar's brows could not help but frown. It seemed that he could not immediately adapt to the discomfort brought about by the microgravity environment. It seems that after getting used to the gravity environment, you will feel uncomfortable with the microgravity environment. Dilindar laughed at himself and raised his hand to signal the two Zaft soldiers guarding the large gate in front of him to open the gate. Come here, Kai. There are some things I need to show you. Behind the gate, other than Dilindar's figure, it was pitch black. But this darkness made the Holy Lion Knight feel a sense of familiarity. Yes, it was a sense of familiarity that came from the depths of his memory. In an instant, a stabbing pain appeared from the depths of his mind. It was as if thunder from the ninth heaven had split open the fog. The moment the fog dispersed, a dazzling light also expelled the darkness behind Dilindar, revealing the truth behind the darkness. A dark gray steel body. Even in a folded state, it still looked like a pair of huge steel wings. This figure was unforgettable at first sight. The Holy Lion Knight called out its name. Free Gouda? That's right. This was the legendary mech that became famous in the battle against Yakin Due. At the same time, it was also the mech that completely blocked the attack of the Genesis. Free Gouda. Speaker, I remember that the Free Gouda was destroyed under the attack of the Genesis. Isn't that right? As the person involved, the Holy Lion Knight was very puzzled. Yes. This is not the Free Gouda that appeared in the battle against Yakin Due. It was an accidental discovery by Zaft's technical department when they were cleaning up the past documents. Dilindar smiled and his eyes seemed to reveal a trace of pride. Of course, what was discovered at that time was only part of the design. In order to fully recover this group of incomplete design drawings, our technical department has invested a lot of manpower and material resources in order to succeed. Now that the First Fleet has returned victorious, we've finally been able to reappear this MS that is like the patron saint of mankind. Under the gaze of the Holy Lion Knight, Dilindar stretched out his finger and pointed at the dark gray steel giant. Knight, although your existence and your reputation have allowed Plant to survive the crisis, it's still not enough. But no matter how powerful your ability is, you are still only a human. Dilindar's gaze moved away from the steel giant and fell on the mask of the Holy Lion Knight. No matter how powerful a knight is, he always needs a sharp sword that can kill any strong enemy. And it is the latest crystallization of Plant and the cutting-edge technology in Zaft's hands. It is also the sharp sword that our highest council has entrusted to you. Sharp sword? Free Gouda? The Holy Lion Knight was silent for a moment, then looked up again and met Dilindar's gaze. Speaker, this is no longer the Free Gouda of the battle against Yakin Due. If this is the expectation of the highest council, then I am more willing to call it the Guardian of Freedom. Guardian of Plant, Guardian of the freedom of all citizens, Gouda. Oh! Dilindar was a little surprised, but he smiled slightly. Is that so? Guardian of Freedom? Perhaps this is a very good name, and at the same time, a good name that matches it. After a pause, Dilindar expressed again. This airframe is assigned to you. The naming is naturally up to you. Chapter 873. When the last wisp of smoke dissipated from the horizon, it was already the first day of Aubrey's rebirth. Facing the sea breeze that blew away the last wisp of smoke, Ray Minkai stood alone in front of the blood-stained monument in silence. In his hand was the projection wristwatch that played the image of the Holy Lion Knight, appearing in front of the plant citizens and turning the tide. The golden light dispelled the darkness that enveloped Aubrey and also dispelled the darkness that tried to cover Ray Minkai's eyes. However, Ray Minkai did not pay attention to the slowly rising sun that scattered its radiance on the land. Instead, he raised his hand to turn off the projection wristwatch and turned around to look behind him. Thank you for your hard work, Real Flying Bird. Standing behind Lei Minkai was Real Flying Bird, who ran to the wounded treatment area to help after the battle ended without looking back. To be honest, Real Flying Bird's behavior did surprise Ray Minkai. Ray Minkai had already had a certain impression of Real Flying Bird. He really did not expect that the Real Flying Bird in front of him would be the reckless young man in his memory. No. Perhaps, at that time, he had let the woman named Jemingard rescue Real Flying Bird in advance on a whim. Then, the fate of the Real Flying Bird in front of him might not overlap with the Real Flying Bird that Ray Minkai was familiar with. Real Flying Bird shook his head in the face of Ray Minkai's praise. Then, his gaze went past Lei Minkai and landed on the monument that was dyed red with blood. Under the brighter sunlight, the blood stains on the monument became more and more eye-catching. It was as if it had just been stained. I heard that this was a monument built by Aubrey after the last war for the civilians who died in the war. Maybe. Ray Minkai nodded and looked at the messy environment around him. The lawn that should have been full of flowers was already full of potholes. In the tumbling soil, some black tissues, broken armor, and mud-covered bullet shells could even be seen. The small forest further away was also in pieces. There was a missing piece in the east and a piece in the west. There were traces of burning everywhere. It was conceivable that this was one of the most intense areas of battle in the previous defense battle. Real Flying Bird stepped forward silently and walked to Lei Minkai's side. At that moment, Ray Minkai saw Real Flying Bird holding a bouquet of flowers in his left hand. Judging from the mess around him, Real Flying Bird seemed to have put in a lot of effort to find this bouquet of flowers. I found this near the treatment area. Real Flying Bird squatted down, placed the flowers in front of the monument, and said, I didn't pay much attention to it during the battle. It wasn't until the battle was over that I realized that there wasn't a single decent flower here. That's just temporary. Not long in the future, flowers will still of the flowers of the flowers of the past. Lei Minkai said slowly as he looked at Real Flying Bird's back. I think so. Real Flying Bird was silent for a moment. Then, he stood up straight again. Facing the gradually warming sea breeze, he slowly spoke. Actually, Aubrey is my motherland. Before that war, I had always stayed here. I grew up here and went to school here. Until that war happened. At that time, I didn't understand why that war happened. I only knew that I followed my lord and left my familiar home. Braving the roaring artillery fire, we fled towards the port. Ray Minkai silently listened to Real Flying Bird's words. If nothing had changed, I'm afraid that the names of me, my sister, and my parents would have appeared on this monument. As he spoke, Real Flying Bird turned around and looked at Ray Minkai and the mask on his face. If that woman hadn't appeared, that woman? Ray Minkai's voice was very calm. Zhenfei Niao's gaze couldn't help but change, but he quickly controlled himself. Yes. A woman who claimed to be Jemingard. Her appearance allowed our family to safely leave Aubrey, which was shrouded in war. Is that so? That's really a lucky thing. Ray Minkai calmly dealt with real flying bird's probing, while sighing in his heart. As expected, real flying bird was still a little slow. Even though the real flying bird in front of him didn't show the recklessness in his memory. Maybe. Then, real flying bird didn't chase after him. Instead, he changed the topic. Under Jemengard's arrangement, my family was able to settle down in Scandinavia. As for me, I went to Plant and became a member of ZAF. Then, he returned here as a soldier of ZAF. Perhaps this is the impermanence of the world. Ray Minkai sighed. Probably. For a moment, the two of them had no more topics to talk about. They just stood silently in front of the monument, looking at the sun that gradually broke away from the horizon and rose higher into the sky. After an unknown amount of time, real flying bird closed his slightly sore eyes. Knight, do you think we will win this war? A war against those monsters that came out of nowhere. Is your confidence shaken? Ray Minkai shifted his gaze and looked at real flying bird. No. It's just that. I have some thoughts. Real flying bird paused and pondered for a moment. Before the crisis of the X1 crack, this world had always been shrouded in the dispute between the naturals and the regulators. In that environment, I joined ZAF. At the same time, I heard and saw some hatred between the naturals and the regulators. You're saying that if those monsters didn't appear, this world might have been swallowed up by the hatred between the naturals and the regulators. Ray Minkai was a little surprised. He didn't expect Real Flying Bird to have his own thoughts. Real Flying Bird hesitated for a moment and nodded silently. If we hadn't met that woman in that war, I'm afraid it would have been the same. That was indeed the case. Ray Minkai muttered in his heart. In the trajectory of the world that hadn't been changed, Real Flying Bird, who had witnessed his parents and sister die tragically in the artillery fire, grew up in hatred. He was also influenced by Ray, who was also the brainwashing mission of the old Fox chairman, and ended up in a hateful and helpless ending. Then, what do you think of this world now? Ray Minkai didn't answer Real Flying Bird's question. Instead, he kicked the question back to Real Flying Bird. He still wanted to see how far Real Flying Bird could go. I don't know. Real Flying Bird frowned. In the end, he still couldn't figure out what he was thinking in his heart. It's not that I don't know. It's just that I don't dare to say it. Am I right? Ray Minkai saw through Real Flying Bird's thoughts at a glance. That's right. The young Real Flying Bird didn't dare to say what he was thinking, because before this, he had personally stood on this battlefield and fought fiercely with the monsters. After the war, he didn't even have time to rest. He ran to the treatment area with the supplies of the Minerva to treat the wounded. The elite pilots on the battlefield. The paramedics in the treatment area. Under the influence of these two identities, Real Flying Bird couldn't say those thoughts no matter how hard he tried. This war is a good thing. Ray Minkai casually said this sentence that Real Flying Bird didn't dare to say. Looking at Real Flying Bird's slightly panicked expression, Ray Minkai smiled slightly. Although I feel a little sorry for them, from the root, this is indeed a good thing. Real. In the face of an external crisis that is so huge that people can't breathe, can't think about the current situation, and only know how to resist the invasion and struggle on the edge of destruction, humans will put down the disputes between each other and gradually move towards the situation of working together to resist the external enemy. Is this possible? Real Flying Bird was very puzzled. Even though True Flying Bird agreed with Lei Minkai's words in her heart, Lei Minkai's words made True Flying Bird agree with him. After experiencing the Battle of Obuhuiye's final line of defense, Real Flying Bird did indeed experience what the world described by Ray Minkai was like. Whether it was in battle or in the treatment area, Real Flying Bird, who was driving ZAF's MS and wearing ZAF's red military uniform, was undoubtedly welcomed by Aubrey's soldiers. In the eyes of the Obu soldiers, This young man who was driving Zaf's MS and wearing Zaf's red military uniform was nothing special. The only special thing was that this young man driving Zaf's MS had once risked his life to save more than half of the Obu armored brigade in a small-scale assault-level raid, thus saving the crisis of the collapse of the defense line. Therefore, in the mouths of the older Obu soldiers, Real Flying Bird had an additional nickname, Red Shirt Kid. Real Flying Bird didn't resist this nickname, nor did he express any objection. Because he felt the recognition from the people around him. Ray Minkai still didn't answer Real Flying Bird's question. Instead, he raised his finger and pointed at Real Flying Bird's heart, then pointed at Real Flying Bird's eyes. The answer is here. Real Flying Bird's mouth moved, and he seemed to be very dissatisfied with Ray Minkai's explanation. But before he could open his mouth, a faint rumble and the voice that followed interrupted him. Good morning, Real Flying Bird. Currently, the monitoring shows that your body's metabolic functions are in some disorder. According to the monitoring results, you need to rest immediately and take measures such as ordering meals according to time, so that your body's functions can return to normal in a short period of time. 3 palm-sized triangular drones flew from a distance. After circling Real Flying Bird several times, the sound of the small suitcase also sounded. Ray Minkai looked back and saw a beautiful figure standing not far away. In front of her was the electric suitcase that was accelerating toward Ray Minkai and Real Flying Bird, as well as the drones it released. It seems that it's time for me to rest. Real Flying Bird looked at the drones circling around him and couldn't help but show a trace of regret. Then I'll go first. Sister Audrey. That is? Lakis, who didn't have time to stop Real Flying Bird, walked to Ray Minkai and asked in confusion. The growth of humans always surprises people, right? Lakis. Ray Minkai showed a smile of anticipation. Chapter 874. On the beach, 2 rows of footsteps followed the pair of snuggling figures. At this moment, the sea breeze that had just started seemed to have calmed down. The scorching sunlight that rose as the sun rose into the sky also seemed to have become gentle. It did not make the pair of snuggling figures feel a trace of heat. Sha! 2 rows of footsteps of different sizes and depths were slowly imprinted on the beach. A gentle breeze blew, bringing with it a trace of pink light. It was the beautiful hair of the woman snuggling next to the man she liked. Kai. A sweet and gentle voice called out softly. Yes, I'm here. The man nodded and slowed down his pace. The pair of gentle eyes reflected the man's face. I have an idea. As the pink hair fluttered, the man seemed to see the determination in the pair of eyes. It's about Aubrey. No, the man paused and said the woman's thoughts. Is it about the future path? What? The subtle sound of the wind lingered around the pair of figures. It was the subtle sound of the drone released by the small box flying. Their role was to create a peaceful environment for the 2 of them that would not be disturbed by anyone and would not let anyone see Lux's true appearance. The pink girl, who had a soul that was far more mature than her tender appearance, nodded slowly. Yes. In fact, I have been thinking about this after the super disaster. What's more, the mastermind behind the super disaster is the Destiny Council that the Space Administration finds troublesome. The man did not speak and just waited for Lux to continue. Before the pioneers intervened, the Space Administration had once organized a large-scale crusade against them. I also participated in that battle as a logistical personnel. Failed? The man who had witnessed the Star City said this answer that even he himself could not believe. Just based on the terrifying potential of the behemoth that occupied the starry sky and was comparable to a planet, it was hard to believe that it would be defeated. No. That was not a failure. Lux shook her head and sighed softly. In the first hour of the battle, under the command of the former director, the Crusade Army organized by the Space Administration quickly captured the headquarters of the Destiny Council. In the first hour, the former director? If it was him, it would not be surprising. The man fell into deep thought. The former director of the Space Administration was the one who almost destroyed the world, Lu Kreutzer. According to Meng Nan's intelligence, his trusted aide could easily do this. Of course, this man was not Kreutzer, who was the enemy of Ray Minkai. The director's ability is reassuring. It's just that his ability is a bit strange. Lux carefully recalled her battle experience back then, even though she was at the rear of the battle line in that crusade. At that time, a very strange piece of data appeared in the real-time battlefield report sent back from the front line. The two's footsteps. Strange? Is it possible that someone has been resurrected on the battlefield, returned to the battlefield alive and kicking, and continued the battle with the expedition army? The man, who was Lei Minkai, didn't expect his teasing to be true. Lakis glanced at Lei Minkai and nodded solemnly. Yes. Just as you thought, there were indeed a few targets that were killed under the precise attack of several Crusade teams. At the same time, the video of the whole process was also fed back to the command system of the flagship. Could the other party be a robot or a clone? Lux shook her head. Not really. In order to prevent the members of the Destiny Council from escaping, the Space Administration made arrangements in advance. They sealed off the spacetime around the headquarters of the Destiny Council and filled this spacetime with all kinds of interference signals, completely isolating any channel that could allow the Destiny Council to communicate with the outside world. In this case, remote control robots, or even mind control of clones, would not work. According to Lakis, the Space Administration had indeed made all the necessary preparations. What's more, clones can't completely clone the ability of the original body. As long as there are subtle differences in behavior, words, and even combat habits, the Azure battleships monitoring the entire battlefield will immediately lock on to this slight difference. Unfortunately, whether it's the tactical system on the flagship or the battlefield monitoring of the Azure battleships, they can't find the difference between the targets that keep dying and resurrecting. Speaking of this, Lux could not help but fall into deep thought. Rather than saying that they are like robots or mind-controlled clones, it's better to say that they are like reflections of the original body standing in front of a mirror. Mirror? Reflections? Maybe I'm not quite accurate, but it feels like every time a target is killed by a Crusade team, in the blink of an eye, the target that should have died immediately appears on the battlefield in a new body. This sounds a bit strange. Ray Minkai thought for a while and shook his head helplessly. He, who had never experienced that crusade, could not imagine that kind of strange feeling. Sorry. Maybe only the Crusade team members who have fought with those targets can explain it clearly. Lux showed a hint of apology. She did not want Ray Minkai to be confused. It was just that Lux still could not understand the strange feeling at that time. No. That's enough. Although I don't know what that strange feeling is, at least we know that those so-called counselors have a life-saving method that we don't know about. After thinking for a while, Ray Minkai said again, "Is this also the reason for you?" Lux nodded slightly. Yes. Although the enemy we are facing now is only a beta under the command of a certain final counselor, it's still unknown what kind of enemy we will encounter in the future. Recalling the enemy, who was an enemy on the surface but secretly revealed a lot of information to them, Lux's thoughts became more and more determined. In order to have more trump cards and confidence in our hands when the unknown happens, we should integrate all the forces that can be united. Is this forming an alliance? Or a huge union? Speaking of this, Ray Minkai's mouth twitched slightly. Or should I say the Empire? As soon as he said this, Ray Minkai felt a sharp pain on his arm. He was pinched. Under the pain, Ray Minkai's mouth twitched again and again, but he did not dare to show too much. What are you thinking? Lux wrinkled her nose and let go of Ray Minkai's arm a little angrily. She raised her finger and pointed at Rei Minkai's nose. In fact, I have already discussed this idea with UFFI. UFFI's idea is not to use the Britannia Empire as the main force to conquer other countries by force, but to jointly deal with the dangers and unknowns brought about by the super disaster. From the standpoint of being victims of the super disaster, we can work together to form an alliance that can resist the unknowns and walk out of this difficult situation together. Looking at Lux, who rarely showed a girl's side, Rei Minkai could not help but laugh. Yes, it's my fault. I didn't understand your and UFFI's thoughts immediately. As he spoke, Rei Minkai spread out his hands. Who asked me to be just a pilot who only knows how to fight and kill? You. Looking at Rei Minkai's expression, Lux couldn't help but feel angry. But very quickly Lux calmed down. Minkai. Acting shamelessly is just a temporary escape. After all, you are the prince of the Britannia Empire. There are some things that you should take the initiative to take responsibility for. As their gazes met, Rei Minkai saw Lux's gentle eyes, which made him unconsciously sink into them. Alliance. Maybe it's still too early. Now. Rei Minkai slowly took in a breath. The most important thing is to take care of Paradise Island and Mr. A. If what that Princess Elizabeth Amir said is true, then Paradise Island will definitely fall. Lux looked at Rei Minkai for a long time, looked into his eyes, and sighed faintly. It's easy to block an open spear, but hard to block a hidden arrow? Lux gently turned her body and once again raised her hand to hold Rei Minkai's right arm. Are you worried that Paradise Island will be attacked from the inside by Mr. A, while they are defending against the Beta's attack? According to that memory, it's very likely. Rei Minkai could not help but let out a sigh of relief. If Lux continued to entangle with the issue of forming an alliance, Rei Minkai did not know how to deal with it. I'm afraid there will be many flaws on Paradise Island. Flaws in people's hearts. The rumbling sound of the explosion gradually subsided. In the billowing smoke, a large number of Beta dropped countless wreckage and stepped on the steel wreckage that was spread by the flames. They were not afraid of the high temperature that was enough to scorch their bodies and quickly retreated from the battlefield. Behind these rapidly retreating monsters, human soldiers with distorted faces and full of anger raised their semi-automatic assault rifles and madly fired at them. During this time, there were all kinds of curses mixed in. However, these curses were quickly overturned by a gust of wind. However, when the angry human soldiers saw the culprit, they did not become angrier. Instead, they raised their guns and aimed at the huge body that was flying through the air. Destroy Gouda! Hooray! Hooray! Under the huge disc was a pair of steel feet that resembled the claws of a bird. From the cannons of various sizes that extended from the top of the disc, it could be seen that this strange-looking behemoth flying with a huge disc on its head was a steel monster that possessed firepower powerful enough to strike fear in the hearts of its enemies. It was the trump card that Paradise Island relied on to destroy Gouda. The person who was piloting this terrifying body was a blonde girl with a painful expression. She clenched her teeth and insisted on operating the body to return. I have to go back. No. Otherwise, Malu will be worried about. Sure. Stella. Chapter 875. Victory. A confident voice rang out. The white light shone on the red wine, creating ripples in everyone's hearts along with this voice. This was a victory. The Atlantic Federation, who once thought of themselves as the leader of mankind, and even the death merchant Blue Persian Chrysanthemum, who controlled this behemoth behind the scenes, thought that they were powerless. In the end, they ushered in their first victory since the outbreak of the X1 crack crisis. This victory came too late. It was so late that they lost all of their territory within their traditional sphere of influence and could only retreat to a small island. The people sitting on the two sofas kept looking at each other, and for a while no one spoke. What's wrong? The man who occupied the first seat alone, holding a glass of red wine and slowly sipping it, seemed to be dissatisfied. Now was the time to celebrate. However, these allies had long faces. What a disappointment! You guys are really a disappointment. The man casually put the wine glass on the table, stood up, and walked around the depressed allies with his hands behind his back, and stopped in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. Luckily, our soldiers didn't see your disheartening faces. Your Excellency Dre, don't you think now is the time to show a victorious smile to the soldiers who fought a bloody battle and finally ushered in victory? The man's voice was steady and powerful, but everyone heard a hint of threat. A threat that could not be shaken by the man's ruling authority. Everyone subconsciously exchanged glances, and in the end, it was the person who was named by the man who spoke. He was one of the people in blue Persian chrysanthemum who had a close relationship with the man. An old man who had just crossed the age of 60. Jeep. Our homeland has been occupied by that group of monsters. From the last message we received from the last base we left on that land before it fell, there's no possibility of our compatriots living there anymore. Yes, it is indeed so. Therefore, this Paradise Island is the last fortress of mankind, the last hope, isn't it, Dre? The man did not turn to look at his allies, but continued to look at the busy command hall below. Now they had entered the post-war tidying up stage. He believed that the detailed results of the battle would be sent to him soon. Without a doubt, this was going to be an inspiring event, and it might even be able to spread the name of Paradise Island to the ears of the humans who were struggling to survive under the attacks of the monsters. Therefore, under the control of the blue Persian chrysanthemum, Paradise Island would definitely become the leader of mankind to walk out of the abyss of monsters and welcome a new future. That was the goal that he, Jepler, had to achieve. The last hope? Jipper. That being said, we still don't know enough about the strength of those monsters. Sending a message to the entire world in such an ostentatious manner, I'm afraid it will be intercepted by the other party, right? Humph. So what? Although the strength of that group of monsters was terrifying, at the same time, they were also very strange. No one knows where they came from, but Paradise Island must be a fortress that those monsters can't touch. After a pause, the man turned his face to the side and looked at his old ally from the corner of his eye. Dre, you're tired. You must have accumulated a lot of fatigue in the process of retreating. It's time for you to rest. The man's proud chuckle slowly sounded. The ally in Dre's eyes was so unfamiliar. Don't worry. Leave this to me, leave it to us. This victory is just the beginning. Dre, I believe that in the near future, we humans will be able to return to our homeland and expel those monsters. Jeeple, you, just as the old man wanted to persuade Kiplier, he was unexpectedly escorted out of the room by two powerful guards, one on the left and one on the right. At the same time, a somewhat nervous correspondent brushed past them and jogged all the way to Jepler's side. What's wrong? That was the last thing Dre heard as he was escorted out of the room by the guards. A few minutes later, the correspondent left the room. However, compared to his previous nervousness, this correspondent's face was relaxed. Once again standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and looking at the busy scene in the command hall below, Jepler slowly raised his gaze and looked at the top left image of the main screen. That was the image from the moon. At the same time, it was also the image from the 8th Fleet, the space fleet that was under the command of Earth's General Hal Barton. This is just a small matter. Compared to the matter of you sending your proud student, assistant, and even the main battleship, Archangel to Paradise Island to support, a mere biological CPU is nothing. While thinking, Jepler raised his hand and signaled to the attendant beside him. You come here. Pass down the order, that the biological CPU called Stella will be temporarily handed over to the captain of Archangel, Marcus Rames. Yes. After giving out the order, Jepler turned around and looked at his allies. Come, my friends. Now is the time to celebrate the victory, isn't it? At the same time, on one side of Paradise Island, inside the huge Naku, two groups of people were confronting each other. On one side was a person wearing a white coat with a spiral logo on the collar. On the other side was a group of people led by two women. In the group of people on both sides there were a considerable number of soldiers equipped with firearms. And the reason for this scene was a blonde girl in the arms of a woman. You guys, it's time to stop. The battle is already over. Why do you still want to continue strengthening? The woman tightly hugged the blonde girl who had already fainted, and looked coldly at the group of people who were determined to take the blonde girl away. Now, what Stella needs is rest, not strengthening. A fierce aura surged like a tsunami, and the group of people in white coats were shocked to the point that they did not dare to make a sound. After hesitating for a while, a slightly older middle-aged man who seemed to have some authority walked out from the crowd. You are the captain of Archangel, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Ramis? Yes. The woman nodded, but her attitude did not soften at all. I'm very sorry. Even if it's you, the captain of Archangel, you can't interfere with our work. This is also the preparation for the next battle. Sheng. No, Stella consumed too much energy in the fierce battle just now. I remember that you guys didn't directly call Stella by her name, but called her and them biological CPU. Am I right? At this time, the black-haired woman standing beside Marcus suddenly interrupted the man's words. During this time, a fierce gaze was also directed at the man's eyes, almost seeing through him. Biological CPU. This was the name that these people in white coats gave to the group of people that Stella was in. Although this is a decision made for the continuation of mankind, your approach is too extreme. The black-haired woman stepped forward and stood in front of Marcus, scolding with a threatening aura. In this war, an experienced pilot can lay the foundation for victory and guide the war to the final victory. Instead of being called biological CPU, here, being wantonly played by you like a white mouse. Do you want to delay the next battle? Sure. No. The man was forced to the limit by the black-haired woman step by step. So, anger appeared in his eyes, and he looked at the black-haired woman without fear, and even raised his hand to point at the blonde girl in Marcus's arms. Is this biological CPU worth all of you doing this? She's just a chess piece that can be discarded at any time. She's only useful before she's abandoned. Shut up, Doctor. At this moment, a cold shout interrupted the man's anger. Both sides turned to look in the direction of the voice. I'm Major Zagus, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Ramis, Major Natale Bakilialu. I've heard of your names for a long time. The person who came didn't pay attention to the group of people in white coats, but greeted Marcus first. Such a friendly attitude made Marcus, the black-haired woman, and Bakilialu exchange glances. The two smart people already knew the intention of the person behind the scenes who secretly controlled this Paradise Island. So, Marcus handed the blonde girl in her arms to someone else to take care of, and returned the greeting with Bakilialu. I'm Marcus Ramis. I'm Natale Bakilialu. After a brief greeting, Zagus looked back at the group of people in white coats, and then said, Commander, I heard that Stella and Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Ramis are old friends, so now that Stella, a great hero, has returned victorious, it's good for the second lieutenant and lieutenant colonel to meet. Do you have any questions? After a moment of silence, the group of people in white coats left, and no longer entangled with Marcus and the others on the issue of Stella's ownership. The captain of the Archangel. I hope Stella can come here as soon as possible. Even if she doesn't continue to strengthen, at least maintain her current physical condition. Hearing this, Margot glanced at the unconscious blonde girl and nodded silently. When Stella wakes up, I'll ask her for her opinion. The storm was resolved. However, in addition to Stella, there were more biological CPUs that were carried out of the battered body and sent to the depths of Paradise Island. Neither Marlowe nor Bujuluru could do anything to them. Being able to bring Stella out was the limit of their abilities. After all, the two, and even the biggest backer of the Archangel, was still far away on the moon. What's more, in addition to the biological CPUs including Stella, there were also other biological CPUs that were forced to flee to Paradise Island under the rampage of monsters. They exchanged their lives for a chance for their family to survive on Paradise Island, and they volunteered to become another type of biological CPU. Chapter 876. The golden-haired girl who was wrapped in a soft white quilt let out a faint murmur, as if she was immersed in a beautiful dream. Her defenseless appearance made the people around her feel distressed. What should we do next, Captain? Bucky Lulu, who had always been strict, looked at Margaret gently stroking the messy hair on Stella's forehead and asked, "What should we do?" Margaret retracted her right hand and exhaled softly. Slowly, Margaret sat up straight and looked at the black-haired woman who had been her partner for many years. She knew that under Bucky Lulu's strict appearance, there was a delicate gentleness that was difficult to detect. In fact, before we came here, the Admiral had privately mentioned a concern to me. Concern? Bucky Lulu's eyes narrowed and then fell on Stella's sleeping face again. Did the Admiral notice that Paradise Island was using a biological CPU from the very beginning? Margaret nodded, her face a little dignified. Yes. Before leaving, the Admiral told me to pay attention to the situation on Paradise Island as much as possible, especially the biological CPU. She paused for a moment, then told him what she had learned from Hal Barton. From the information provided by the Admiral regarding the Battle of Yakinduwe, and even earlier information, the Earth Union, many countries led by the Atlantic Union have secretly set up research institutions to strengthen people and continuously develop biological CPU technology. Even after the defeat of Yakinduwe, these technologies never stop. Listening to Margaret's secret, Bucky Lulu's expression changed several times, and finally, she let out a long sigh. As a member of a military family, Bucky Lulu could naturally perceive these clues hidden in the dark. It was just that, because of the war, Bucky Lulu didn't think much about it. I didn't expect the rumors I heard in the army to be true. But, at this time, the sleeping Stella turned her body, and the white quilt slipped from Stella's shoulders. Seeing this, Bucky Lulu bent down slightly to adjust the quilt for Stella, sat down on the bed, and looked up at Margaret and continued. I already understand the intentions of the Admiral and Captain. It's just that the situation on Paradise Island is not optimistic. Even after the arrival of the Archangel, Paradise Island had won all the battles that had taken place on the island. However, the enemy's strength is not as simple as it seems on the surface. Until now, in the battle records of Paradise Island, there has never been any mention of a large-scale enemy organization. At this point, Bucky Lulu raised a concern. No matter how good the pilots, including Stella, are, once the monsters start to organize themselves, the situation that Paradise Island is facing will be broken. Malu nodded, her expression becoming extremely solemn. This is also what the commander is worried about. Compared to the higher-ups on Paradise Island, the Admiral on the Moon should know better how scary those monsters are. Malu had her reasons for saying these words. When the remnants of the United Earth Army led by the Atlantic Federation escaped from the American continent, the Moon was also attacked by those monsters. However, due to the special nature of the space environment, as well as the powerful defense of the lunar base that the Earth Alliance redesigned after the last war, the 8th Fleet led by Hal Barton was able to defend the only Earth Alliance military base in space. We are unlucky, but at the same time we are also lucky. The number of those monsters is overwhelming and terrifying, but the attack strategy of these monsters is not organized, they only know how to attack like a swarm of bees. This may be the luck of mankind. After defending the Ptolemy lunar base, Hal Barton once said this. From the moment the battle started, Hal Barton, who was standing at the forefront of the war, saw through the real situation of these monsters, but also saw the horror hidden behind these monsters. Right now, the monsters that mankind was fighting against did not have any obvious organization, they only relied on their terrifying numbers to sweep across the world, causing the once powerful Earth Alliance to lose most of their territory overnight. If, on the basis of such a terrifying number of monsters, coupled with an appropriate strategy and tactics, thinking of this, Bucky Lulu shuddered. What the commander is worried about is right. But there is nothing we can do. Knowing this was one thing, but Bucky Lulu did not have a better way to make Paradise Island prepare for this. Even if Bucky Lulu was the vice-captain of the Archangel, she could not influence Paradise Island's strategy. Yes, there is nothing we can do. After defending the Ptolemy lunar base, the Archangel was ordered to land on Earth and receive the defeated army of the Atlantic Federation to Paradise Island. At the same time, it let Marlou and Bucky Lulu see the stubbornness that did not change even after losing their territory. "Commander, is there any news?" Marlou lowered her gaze and looked at the sleeping Stella. "No. It has been 48 hours since the last communication, but we have not been able to contact the commander." "Then, let us do what we have to do. This island is probably the last base of the Atlantic Federation on Earth. Will we be able to defend it?" After a moment of silence, Marlou added, "I have a feeling those monsters had never used their true strength. Even if those monsters have occupied the territory of the Atlantic Federation." DDD. At this moment, a rapid ringtone interrupted their conversation. "It's me." Bucky Lulu reached out and pressed the communication button on the wall beside her. "Vice Captain, there is a situation. The Outer Guard fleet of Paradise Island found something abnormal. Now transfer the image to your side." The communication from the bridge made Marlou frown. No. This was not the message of the monsters invading again. But Marlou straightened her body and moved to Bucky Lulu's side, looking at the small communication screen with her. In an instant, their faces changed dramatically, and their pupils dilated subconsciously. Under the bright and beautiful sunlight, a huge blue wall was sweeping over from the horizon with an overwhelming momentum. The white line set off by the huge wall of Gouda that was thousands of meters tall moved at a speed visible to the naked eye, from invisible to vaguely visible to the naked eye, and then to clearly visible. It did not stop at all to submerge everything that blocked its path. Rumble, that was the terrifying power from nature. That was the terrifying power from nature. That was the supreme power from the ocean. That was the monstrous tsunami that swept everything. Alert! Alert! All personnel on the ground immediately return to cover. Return to cover immediately. All personnel working on the ground, return to the nearest bunker immediately and prepare to resist the impact and flood. Alert! Alert! The ear-piercing alarm rang throughout the entire island, and it also stimulated the hearing of all personnel on the ground. The white line from the sky was incomparably spectacular, but under this spectacle, it was also incomparably fatal. Tsunami? Ray Minkai, who heard the news and rushed to the bridge of the Son of Dan Nu, looked at the image captured by the high-altitude drone in surprise. Yes. Half an hour ago, the high-altitude drone we sent out captured this image. A tsunami of unimaginable scale is happening, and it's coming toward Aubrey. Teresa reported the discovery half an hour ago with a grave expression. According to the data analysis provided by Hinana, this may be a secondary disaster of a super disaster. We haven't found the source of the disaster yet. But the more important thing now is to evacuate all personnel on the ground immediately. Yes, I've already arranged it. On the screen was the image on Carrie's side. From the environment she was in, she should have already evacuated to the underground facility of Aubrey's Department of Defense. However, whether this underground facility, which was used to resist enemy invasion, could survive this terrifying tsunami was still unknown. Carrie, actually, you can board the son of Dan Nu Lux, who followed Ray Minkai into the bridge, said softly. No. This is good. Prime Minister Aubrey should stand on Aubrey's land, and face the difficulties together with the soldiers and the citizens. Carrie smiled and declined Lux's invitation. In fact, after the evacuation alarm was issued, the son of Dan Nu, and even the Aubrey soldiers and staff working near the Minerva were notified to enter the son of Dan Nu as well as the Minerva to take refuge. Therefore, even if Carrie boarded the son of Dan Nu to take refuge, it was understandable. Although it's a bit reckless, at least you've made the right decision. Prime Minister. A figure appeared beside Carrie. She was none other than Lund Mina Sahak, who had stayed in the underground facility with Carrie. Her eyes met Lei Minkai's on the other side of the screen. Night. The workers on the ground have already evacuated. You can evacuate to higher altitudes to take refuge. Ray Minkai looked at the other side of the screen, where Captain Talia of the Minerva was. Captain Talia, when you're ready, take off immediately. Okay. The situation was urgent, and pleasantries would only delay them further. Therefore, the two captains gave the order in unison. Son of Dan Nu, take off. Full speed ascent. Minerva, take off. Full speed ascent. Asterisk rumble. Asterisk the white line was clearly visible. The shadow cast by the monstrous tsunami shrouded the Orbu Islands with a roar that resounded through the sky, and covered most of the two battleships that were climbing to a higher altitude. At this moment, as the white line got closer and clearer, everyone could not help but break out in cold sweat. However, neither Teresa nor Talia said anything to urge the helmsman to increase the speed of the ship. The two captains knew very well and trusted the abilities of their subordinate. Close. Close. The shadow cast by the monstrous tsunami came crashing down, completely drowning the Aubrey Islands. Chapter 877. Doomsday. Just like, no. This was the real doomsday. If the monsters from another world brought about terror and bloody slaughter, then the monstrous tsunami at this moment originated from the power of nature. It was the supreme power, and supreme terror that had always existed in this world, so long before life was even born. Before this supreme power, and supreme terror, even Ray Minkai, who was piloting Lancelot King's sword back and forth in the tide of the Beta army, still felt the nerves of his whole body tense up. His gaze was solemn, and a trace of fear flashed through his eyes. Even at this moment, he was already among the sons of Dan's slave that had leaped high into the sky, and he could still feel the terror brought about by this supreme power from nature. At this moment, no one made a sound. The only thing that remained were the pairs of eyes that were glued to the screen. It was the image captured by the high-precision camera that was looking down from the son of Dan's slave. The monstrous tsunami completely submerged the Ob archipelago in the wave that destroyed everything. In that instant, all the antenna arrays that allowed the Minerva, the son of Dan's slave, to contact Carrie, were destroyed by the terrifying waves. All that was left was the wreckage that tumbled powerlessly in the waves until it was swept away to an unknown location. Looking at the white waves on the screen, the monstrous tsunamis that swept straight and resolutely into the distance, everyone was silent, their faces pale. On the bridge of the Minerva, Adam's eyes were wide open. His mouth was unconsciously opening and closing, and his throat was letting out muffled murmurs. As the backbone of the ship, Talia gripped the handle of the chair tightly with both hands and did not say a word for a long time. It had already exceeded the knowledge and adaptability that the captain of Zaf's newest warship should have. Minerva, how's the situation on your side? Have you been affected? At this moment, the communication from the sons of Dan's slave came. It was Ray Minkai. Fortunately, thanks to the timely warning from the sons of Dan's slave, the Minerva was not affected. It's just that the current personnel has reached the limit. I'm afraid we won't be able to hold on for long. After being pulled back to reality by the communication, Talia's mind raced as she sorted out her thoughts. The situation with the sons of Pill slaves is similar. However, we need to contact Prime Minister Carly immediately. On the other side of the screen, Teresa continued Ray Minkai's words and added, according to the results collected and calculated by the high-altitude drones and the supercomputing center of the Dan Slave's Sun, it will take at least 10 hours for the tsunami to subside. In other words, we have to watch this terrible scene and continue to be powerless. Looking at Talia's pale face, Ray Minkai shook his head and sighed. I'm afraid that's the only way. To tell you the truth, the Children of Dan's Slave is a warship that can fight underwater, but the terror hidden in the scene below has already exceeded the limits of what the Children of Dan's Slave can bear. Captain Talia, in front of this horrifying scene, we are just powerless mortals. Teresa's words made Talia shake her head, but she could only accept the reality in front of her. It engulfed everything and erupted into waves of roaring tsunamis. It was extremely noisy, as if it was the most vicious mockery in the world, mocking their powerlessness over and over again. Boom! In the void, several flashes of light fell from the sky, and the moment they touched the monstrous wave, they burst out with incomparably bright and dazzling brilliance. In the earth-shaking roar, the monstrous wave that could devour everything in the world was blasted into several holes in an instant. Boom! The dazzling brilliance took away the light between the sky and the earth, and it also became a hindrance for the monstrous wave to advance inland. In just 1 second, the insufferably arrogant advance was already delayed, and even the monstrous wave that stepped into thousands of miles of land was blasted away. Success! High in the sky, the huge fortress that occupied the sky was filled with cheers. The young empress, who was sitting on the throne, finally relaxed her tightly clenched fists a little. Everyone listen to my order. Continue the interception operation according to the plan. Now is not the time to cheer. Looking at the fading brilliance and the monstrous wave that surged back toward the gap, the young empress knew that this interception operation was far from over. Yes, for the Empire. For Empress Euphemia. In the face of a sudden natural disaster, it was inevitable for mortals to feel fear and panic. But in the most powerful floating fortress of the Britannia Empire, which represented the most powerful conventional armed force of the Britannia Empire, the imperial soldiers who followed the young Empress Euphemia's order to carry out the interception operation quickly calmed down and began a rigorous and precise operation again. Your Majesty, I didn't expect Freya to be used in this place. The tall woman standing beside the young Empress sighed slightly. Sister. In any case, since Freya is a weapon, it can be used. The reason why humans created weapons is to protect themselves. The young Empress shook her head slightly, but her attitude was incomparably firm. Now, in the face of this sudden natural disaster, I'm afraid Freya is the only means of defense the Empire can use. But, as the two spoke, several brilliants shot out from the floating fortress and instantly sank into the monstrous wave below, once again dispersing the monstrous wave that had just gathered and was about to engulf everything. Rumble, the atmosphere roared. The air shook. The gusts of wind set off by it blew away the floating clouds around the floating fortress, but it was unable to shake the floating fortress of the Empire, known as the Sword of Damocles, in the slightest. But there's only one floating fortress, the Sword of Damocles Reese. Facing the Empire's incomparably long western coast, it has more than enough strength, but not enough strength. Euphemia clenched her fists slightly again and sighed silently. Your Majesty, there's no need to blame yourself. This is something we couldn't have predicted. Moreover, As soon as we discovered the disaster, Your Majesty had already ordered the first floating fleet that the Empire had just formed to set sail and head to the key areas of the Empire's western coast to defend. Cornelia, as one of the Empress's right-hand women, softly consoled the Empress in front of her. Sister, you're right. We've already done what we can do. Euphemia slowly got up and stared at the huge main screen, staring at the monstrous wave that was dispersing, gathering, dispersing, and gathering again under the bombardment of Freya. Sister, inform the Empire to prepare all rescue plans. After this disaster ends, immediately start the rescue. Yes, Your Majesty. Cornelia received the order and retreated, leaving the young Empress alone to stare at the monstrous wave. There shouldn't be any big problems on the Empire's side. But what about your side? Although the son of Dan's slave is also equipped with a considerable number of Freya, in the face of such a terrifying monstrous wave, those Freya probably won't be of much use. The young Empress, who had used the power of the entire country to fight against this terrifying secondary disaster, was only worried about her guardian knights now that the overall situation had been settled. On the other side of the ocean, on the already submerged archipelago, the son of Dan's slave and the Minerva were wandering around here, not leaving for a long time. Captain Knight. In the sound of the cabin door opening, the tall figure of Richard Madukas appeared. However, he didn't bring any good news. Madukas, what's wrong? The sharp Teresa immediately noticed the abnormality of her right-hand man. Yes. The emotions of the crew on this ship are stable and not affected by the secondary disaster. Currently, orderly rescue preparations are being carried out. Richard Madukas looked around, then slightly lowered his body, and said in a voice that only Teresa could hear. However, there seems to be some abnormalities among the OB defense force that we took in. Got it. Teresa nodded and then looked at Ray Minkai. I'm afraid what we worried about is about to happen. Hearing this, Ray Minkai nodded silently. That's what we expected as well. In the face of a disaster, the scarier thing is the human heart. Isn't that right? However, we should rejoice that we're currently in the son of pill slaves. Then, Ray Minkai looked to the side. Look, I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you again. The pink girl smiled and accepted it gladly. It's what I should do. I'm more used to this than fighting. Teresa, then, I'll take my leave first. I'm counting on you, Miss Lux Klein. Teresa stood up and saluted Lux. Lux nodded slightly at Teresa and turned to walk out of the bridge. Madukas, let Melissa and the others accompany Miss Lux. Yes, sir. After making the arrangements, Teresa let out a sigh of relief. When she returned to her seat, she also looked at Ray Minkai. The son of Dan's slave should be fine. But the Minerva doesn't have a second Lux Klein. That's true. But I believe that Captain Talia should be able to handle it better. After all, compared to the crew of the son of Dan's slave, the Minerva represents Plant and Zaf. Ob should be more familiar with them and get used to their existence. Is that so? Let's hope so. Teresa raised her right hand and subconsciously pinched her braid as she silently planned her next move. This disaster came so suddenly that it would have a huge impact on the future situation. Especially the original plan, the operation to Paradise Island. But now, looking at the submerged Ob archipelago, Paradise Island, which was also an isolated island in the ocean, would not fare any better. Chapter 878. While the roar of the diesel engine shook the sky, the waves were also broken by the speedboat that was traveling at high speed on the sea, leaving snow-white traces on the rolling sea. Among the undulating speedboats, many pairs of eyes were staring in a certain direction. They seemed to be searching for something. However, in the face of the vast sea, humans who could only rely on their naked eyes to search for anything that could possibly appear on the surface of the sea were so powerless. Fortunately, there were 2 warships built with the most advanced human technology on top of these speedboats that were speeding on the surface of the sea as aerial observation platforms to support the speedboat. Searcher 1 and 3, there is an abnormal signal 800 meters to your left. Please go and check it out. Searcher 4 and 8, there is an abnormal flow of water 300 meters to your right. Please get as close as possible and release a buoy to monitor it. Searcher 9, all sorts of instructions from the 2 warships rang out on the communication channel, guiding the speedboats that were braving the wind and the waves to proceed with the next step of the search. Looks like things have calmed down. On the communication screen, Talia heaved a sigh of relief. Half an hour ago, the Aubrey soldiers who had witnessed their homeland being drowned by a 10,000-meter tsunami and were lucky enough to avoid this life-and-death crisis did not show much emotion at first. However, that was only on the surface. The moment the Obu archipelago was submerged, fear and helplessness had been planted deep in the hearts of the Obu soldiers who were fortunate enough to escape to the Danu children and the Minerva. They were ready to explode at any moment. And this seed only needed a subtle opportunity to germinate and grow, igniting the deep fear in the hearts of these Aubrey soldiers who had been through so many life-and-death crises and had yet to truly get a chance to breathe. As an experienced captain, Talia naturally understood this point. Unfortunately, the Minerva did not have someone like Lux Klein who could easily soothe the emotions of others with word. Therefore, as the atmosphere in the Children of Dan's slaves gradually stabilized, the anomaly that Talia was worried about also occurred on the Minerva. Fortunately, the anomaly that Talia was worried about was finally passed without any mishaps, and the person who resolved this crisis was coincidentally Real Flying Bird. I didn't expect Real Flying Bird to have the talent to be an orator. Ray Minkai, who knew the whole story, couldn't help but reveal an inquisitive smile. Putting aside the Real Flying Bird that he had come into contact with several times in this world, the Real Flying Bird in the past, who only knew how to shout crazily, let the people around her manipulate her, and walk down the wrong path step by step, would not have anything to do with an orator. Not to mention, at that critical moment of life and death, he had to comfort the Aubrey soldiers who were overwhelmed by the suffocating pressure. Although I'm surprised, I feel the same way. Night. Talia rubbed her forehead and sighed. I've heard my elders say that the battlefield is like a furnace, constantly melting and refining something in everyone's body, and in the end, giving birth to an unpredictable result. From the looks of it, the Real Flying Bird that Captain Talia spoke of has probably walked on an unimaginable path. Teresa looked away from CIC, who was guiding the search for the speedboat team, and looked at the communications screen. Perhaps. But now was not the time to talk about this. Night, Captain Teresa. Did you find a signal to contact the Prime Minister? Talia's question didn't get the answer she wanted. After all, this was the answer that everyone wanted to get, but they couldn't get it. Now that the monstrous waves that drowned everything had finally subsided, the Aubrey archipelago was still submerged by the endless sea that had yet to recede. However, the seawater that drowned the Aubrey archipelago did not recede according to the calculations made by the Son of Dan News supercomputing terminal. In order to find out if there were any signs of life in the permanent fortifications tens of meters, or even hundreds of meters underground, and to contact Carly, Mina, and the others, the Aubrey archipelago's sonar was anxious. At the same time, in order to comfort the anxious Aubrey soldiers, the Son of Dan New and the Minerva had formed a speedboat search team with the Aubrey soldiers as the main body. Therefore, the previous scene of the speedboats braving the wind and waves, circling the coordinates of the Aubrey archipelago, and searching constantly. According to the sonar search results, we haven't found the signal of Prime Minister Carly and the others yet. Even if the terrifying tsunami has subsided, there is still a lot of noise under the water that prevents the sonar from working properly. If we increase the number of sonars, will we have a higher chance of finding the signal of Carly and the others? Ray Minkai rubbed his chin and said thoughtfully. The permanent underground fortifications built with the strength of a country naturally won't be destroyed so easily. But don't forget that the Aubrey archipelago is now in an environment that is at least hundreds of meters below the surface. Knight, are you worried about the oxygen in the fortifications? Teresa immediately grasped the key point that Ray Minkai was worried about. With her experience as the captain of a landing submarine, Teresa knew very well what the humans in the submarine needed in the deep sea. Based on the current situation of the permanent underground fortification under Ob, Teresa suddenly felt that she couldn't let this drag on any longer. Yes. Let's not talk about whether the fortifications have the design for air filtration in an enclosed environment. Just based on the terrifying destructive power of the earth-shattering tsunami, it's hard not to worry about whether the permanent underground fortifications can withstand it. It seems that we need to make some decisions. Talia did not wait for Ray Minkai to finish speaking and decisively made a decision. The Minerva will land on the surface of the sea in a moment and turn on all the sonars to conduct a new round of search. Captain Talia. No, Captain Teresa. The Minerva is still unable to fly freely in the sky like your son of Dan's slave. Be careful. The son of Dan's slave will monitor the surrounding environmental data at all times and inform you immediately. Okay. Please. After a while, the Minerva slowly landed on the surface of the sea below and temporarily set up a powerful sonar surveillance net with the speedboats scattered around the surrounding sea. It had to be said that this method seemed to work. The moment the surveillance net was formed, waves of signals from the depths of the sea below gradually jumped on the screen. No. It's not noise. It's a signal. It's Morse's signal. It's a signal from the permanent underground fortifications. The CIC of the Minerva, Mei Ling, widened her eyes in surprise and exclaimed. The fortifications are partially damaged, but there are not many casualties. Please provide assistance as soon as possible. They're still alive. The red warning light slowly flashed. It dyed the exhausted and fearful faces with a layer of horrifying color that alternated between black and red. Ta-ta-ta light and cautious footsteps sounded from the depths of the corridor. They walked past the people who were powerlessly sitting on the sides of the corridor or lying unconscious on the ground. Looking at the exhausted and despairing faces, Maureen frowned, but there was nothing she could do. The losses were heavy. The military strength of Paradise Island instantly fell from its peak, where they dared to claim that they would protect any human compatriots who came to seek refuge, to an embarrassing situation where they could not even protect themselves. And this change only took a few minutes. No, it should be said that it took an instant. It was a tsunami that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Even though they received the warning in advance, the fleets patrolling the waters around Paradise Island were destined to be destroyed by the tsunami. Furthermore, even the mobile MS squadron that was closer to Paradise Island could not make it back in time and were swept into the deep sea by the tsunami. No one knew if they were dead or alive. What made Maureen even more worried was that during the emergency evacuation process, there were a few ports on Paradise Island that did not have enough time to close the gates and were swept into the ports by the tsunami. This caused an immeasurable loss to the battleships, MS Squadron, and even the people and resources in the ports, not to mention the various defensive structures that were built on the surface of Paradise Island. Now, even if the monsters did not come after Paradise Island itself would be in trouble. The more Maureen thought about it, the more her heart sank. The destruction of Paradise Island might happen in an instant. If that was the case, what would happen to humanity? Get out of here! Get out! Get out! After passing through the corridor, Maureen arrived at the deepest part of Paradise Island. Before she could tell the guards why she was there, an angry roar from the room at the end of the corridor interrupted her. She looked up and saw a group of people with serious expressions and a hint of panic in their eyes leaving the room. Jeep, you have to think carefully. The current situation of Paradise Island is already. Someone in the crowd wanted to yell at the people in the room, but when he saw Margaret's figure, he suddenly shut his mouth. Let's go. Perhaps it was because of Maureen's presence. Perhaps it was because they felt that it was not a good place to shout. That person waved his hand and led the crowd away in a hurry, leaving behind a frowning Maureen. A bunch of idiots. Now is the best chance. After another angry roar came from the room, it fell into silence. The guards did not intend to let them go and only silently signaled to Maureen. Maureen naturally knew what the guards were hinting at. Furthermore, she did not want to get into trouble at this time. Please pass on the message. Just now, the Archangel received a message from the 8th Fleet. Chapter 879. As the waves surged, monsters emerged from the waves and swarmed toward Paradise Island, which was regarded by the Atlantic Federation as the land of salvation for mankind. The cannons that used to roar were silent and no longer roaring. The steel warships that used to block the monsters were gone, and they no longer fired cannonballs that could overturn a large group of assault-level or even fortress-level cannonballs. The steel giants that used to shuttle among the monsters and rain blood were no longer moving, allowing the monsters to break through the sea and step onto the beach of Paradise Island. Alert! Alert! The enemy has broken through the final defense line and is attacking the gate. The big screen in front of him recorded the monsters landing clearly, so clear that Jeepler could see every part of the monsters. This made Jeepler feel disgusted and incomparable anger. Attack! Send all the personnel, tanks, and even the MS that can move out. Quick! If the final defense line is broken, none of us will be able to escape. Quick! Move quickly! Jeepler's eyes were red as he gave orders. Even so, the forces that Paradise Island could mobilize were less than 50% of their peak. Less than 10% of the fleet was left, and the remaining battleships could only form the First Fleet, which was also the only fleet that could be sent out to battle. The ground defenses were all destroyed in the tsunami. Other than the 3 that destroyed Gouda, less than 40% of the MS troops were left. It was just a monstrous tsunami. It was a tsunami that no one had expected. The damage caused by the monstrous tsunami almost overwhelmed Paradise Island and Jeepler, shattering the pride in Jeepler's heart and the fighting spirit that vowed to compete with Dilindar. Reality was so cruel. Sir, the Archangel is calling. Answer it. Yes. Reality was incomparably cruel. But in the midst of the cruelty, there was still a glimmer of hope. Captain Mariu, is there any news from Admiral Halbarton? As soon as Maria's head appeared on the screen, Jeepler immediately went straight to the point. Yes. The Admiral already knows the situation here and said that he will send reinforcements at the appropriate time. Reinforcements? Is that so? As expected of the wise general of our Earth Alliance, Halbarton. After receiving Margot's assurance, the anxiety in Jeepler's heart calmed down a little. As for how Halbarton was going to support Paradise Island, Jeepler didn't ask any further. The calamity on Paradise Island would definitely be discovered by Halbarton, who was far away on the moon. Jeepler believed that Halbarton, who dared to send his trusted aide, the Archangel, to Paradise Island alone, definitely had his own secret information channels. Also, Captain Maru Ramias. Is Stella Lucier still on the Archangel? Now, I'm afraid we need her to stand up and fight for Paradise Island. After calming himself down, Kiplier stared at Stella, who had been taken away by Margot. If possible, Jeepler didn't want to offend Margot and the Archangel. However, the current situation was more important than the current situation. Paradise Island, which had suffered a huge loss, urgently needed the Destruction Gouda to be deployed. And as one of the pilots of the Destruction Gouda, Stella would definitely not let this go. Stella has already left the Archangel as soon as possible. I believe she has already started to board the destruction Gauda. On the other side of the screen, Margaro took the initiative to cut off the communication with Jipper. Captain, the Archangel is ready to attack. Please give your orders. Bucky Lulu on the side reminded at the right time. Okay. Margaro nodded, then stood up and said sternly, I believe everyone already knows and understands our current situation. How pitiful was Paradise Island now? How powerless is it? All of this is not what we want, nor is it what the soldiers who are determined to protect this island want. But the calamity has already happened, and Paradise Island's combat power has been greatly reduced. We have no choice but to use this meager and almost pitiful force to face the attack of those monsters. Pausing, Margaro bit her lips slightly. This attack might be the end of many people's lives. But other than that, we have no other choice. Because we are the last line of defense for Paradise Island. After saying that, Margaro looked around. None of the faces she saw were nervous, fearful, or flustered. Some were calm and determined faces. Nodding slightly, Margaro raised her right hand and gave the order. Archangel, attack. Yes. Archangel, attack. Archangel, fully armed. Those monsters will not let the Archangel attack smoothly. The moment the gate opens, all the weapons except the positron siege cannon immediately fire forward. Bucky Lulu made a shocking instruction. But no one, including Margaro, objected. Because they knew that this was the right thing to do. Now. Right now. The beach outside was already filled with many alien monsters. Boom! The moment the heavy gate opened, the twisted and terrifying figures appeared in front of the Archangel. The moment their shadows entered the gate and below the Archangel, Bucky Lulu decisively gave the order. Archangel, attack! Boom! Boom! At this moment, in front of the Archangel, a sea of fire had already risen outside the gate, blasting the monsters that tried to rush into the base through the opened gate into pieces. Amidst the billowing smoke, the pure white Archangel slowly accelerated, passed through the gate, passed through the sea of fire that burned the alien monsters, and rushed into the battlefield with Paradise Island as the center. Left rudder 4, target, support the First Fleet. Yes. Left rudder 4. Target, support the First Fleet. Then, Margaro looked at Bucky Lulu. Natale, I'll leave the battle orders to you. Understood. Captain, please concentrate on commanding the battle. Leave the rest to me. As soon as the pure white battleship attacked, it relied on its incomparably powerful firepower to wipe out most of the alien monsters that landed, clearing a zone with enough room for maneuver for the subsequent attacks of the MS troop. However, Margaro knew that this was only temporary. Although the alien monsters that were wreaking havoc on Paradise Island were as numerous as ants, the real killer move had yet to appear. Light level. The only thing that could threaten the Archangel was the alien monster that could shoot lasers. This was the reminder that Bucky Lulu had given before. Suddenly, an anxious aura spread in the air. It was as if something terrifying had descended on this battlefield. Boom! It was an incomparably dazzling light. It was the divine flame that burned the sinful bodies of this world to ashes. Wherever the light reached, all the alien monsters were turned into ashes. Even the surface of the sea that was rolling endlessly and surging with countless alien monsters was burned to ashes, leaving several pitch-black and straight marks. Amidst the rolling flames, the figures of 3 huge steel giants appeared. It was Destruction Gauda, who was regarded as the trump card by Jepler. Archangel, can you hear me? I'll cover you. While shedding light at the alien monsters, Destruction Gauda, who was in the lead of the attack, sent a communication signal to the Archangel. This voice? Stella. The figure that appeared on the screen surprised Margaro a little. Yes. Margaro. Archangel, just move forward. Leave this to us. The huge pitch-black body raised its hand and wiped out all the alien monsters that blocked the Archangel's advance. Okay. Stella, protect yourself. Understood. After the Archangel and Destruction Gauda entered the battlefield one after another, Paradise Island's precarious final line of defense finally stabilized. Looking at the battle line that was gradually being pushed back, everyone in the command center couldn't help but sweat. Not enough. Not enough. Now, we're just stabilizing the battle line. Jepler, who had his hands behind his back, gritted his teeth. He wasn't confused by the situation in front of him. The enemy. The group of monsters hadn't used their killing moves yet. Now, they were just using their advantage in numbers to consume the strength of Paradise Island. That old fox. Jepler understood that Halberton's reinforcements would come. However, it would only appear when Paradise Island was in danger. This was something that could not be blamed. If it were him, he would definitely do the same. Deep in the ocean, a huge black shadow was standing in this quiet but lively deep sea. It was quiet because the creatures that lived in this deep sea had long fled. The liveliness was due to the fact that countless alien monsters were rushing out of the huge shadow, charging towards the distant island against the chaotic currents and rolling sand. What a surprise! These insects were actually able to survive that tsunami. In the depths of the black shadow, in a certain spacious underground cabin, a graceful yet extremely dangerous figure was laughing. Don't tell me that you were defeated by these bugs? Elizabeth St. Amiles. They weren't the ones who defeated me. It was a knight. Doris Moros. Following the sound of flesh membrane surging, another figure came to the side of the dangerous and graceful figure amidst the liquid biomass flowing all over the ground. She was Elizabeth St. Amos, who had been defeated by Ray Minkai. Knight? Elizabeth St. Amiles. Now we have already become monsters. Do you still adhere to that damned code? Without waiting for Elizabeth to speak, the graceful and dangerous figure laughed coquettishly. Speaking of which, I'm really interested in meeting the knight who can defeat you. Right. You didn't lose to that knight on purpose, did you? Elizabeth. Whether you lost to that knight on purpose or not, you'll know when he comes. Come? That knight will come here? He clearly encountered a monstrous tsunami on his side. Now, even his country must have disappeared, right? He'll come, Elizabeth said in her heart. We still have a score to settle between us. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.